Chapter 10-12. Hee, Brother Ma is lacking. You probably don't know how powerful the 5-star army ships are. Let me tell you, they have the fastest power in the world. At the same time, each ship is equipped with cannons that are several times more advanced than ours. Once we defeat them and occupy their ships, it will greatly increase Brother Ma's strength. Moreover, the king said 1/3, but he isn't here. How much 1/3 is there? Isn't it up to the two of us to decide? Hearing that the spoils of war were so generous, Ma Keqing was already tempted. When he heard Ferdinand's words, he smiled again. Then everything will depend on the Prime Minister? No, all victory will depend on Brother Ma. This time, the enemy isn't weak. Don't hold back. A smile appeared on Ferdinand's face as well, followed by bursts of laughter. The two of them had reached an agreement just like that. There were no eternal friends, no eternal enemies, only eternal benefits. When the benefits were big enough, people would take risks. Ma Keqing made the decision to fight with the 5-star army. In order to tilt the scales of victory towards here, Ferdinand used his identity as the Prime Minister of the F country to give orders to the nearby sea regions. Once the battle started, they were required to do everything possible to stop the nearby 5-star army's reinforcements. They had to buy enough time for them to destroy the enemy's main force. Regarding this, Ma Keqing didn't put it in his eyes. He said bluntly, "We have already investigated. The 5-star army's navy is divided into 3 parts. Each part has less than 10,000 people and less than 200 ships. As long as they are surrounded by us, they won't be able to escape, let alone send a message." What Ma Keqing meant was that Ferdinand's actions were superfluous. Ferdinand laughed and said, "I don't think Brother Ma's goal is so short-sighted. I arranged a few people to watch over the other 5-star army's main force. If we can destroy more enemy ships, wouldn't we gain more benefits?" "Ah, that's feasible." Ma Keqing laughed heartily, as if the main force of the 5-star naval division was already present and could be easily manipulated by him. This was not his fault. He could only blame himself for the fact that the 5-star naval division was only active in the area around Little Ryukyu Island. They were only passing by Sumantala. Considering their limited military strength, they had not established any influence there. Those who didn't know didn't care. Ma Keqing didn't know the strength of the 5-star army's navy, which was why he made such a decision. But reality soon, not all ships' navy's navy. Some power was like a sharp blade's edge, it was impossible to block off its light fleet's light. Set Ma Keqing's navy's navy, S's. Among them, Ma Keqing led the main force and appeared here. He was ready to fight a decisive battle with the 5-star army. However, he had already set up hundreds of warships and tens of thousands of bandit soldiers in the surroundings, ready to surround them. Using oneself as bait to lure the enemy over and surround them had been done many times. Ma Keqing's face was naturally filled with confidence. After arranging everything, he ordered the scout ship to leave and find the main force of the 5-star army to lead it over. The 5-star army's main force was Hai's 2nd Division. Division Commander Zhao Changwang first raided Mindoro Island and occupied it without much effort. After that, all they had to do was wait. 3 days later, the logistics forces arrived, bringing with them countless Luzon residents and a battalion of garrison soldiers. After taking over the coastal defense of this place, the 2nd Division continued south, taking over 6 or 7 islands of various sizes, including Busanga Island. The result was the same. Because these islands were too small, it was impossible for any army to be stationed there. When Hai's 2nd Division arrived, these so-called Dufay's army either fled at the sight of them or chose to surrender after being surrounded. There was not even a decent battle. This made Division Commander Zhao Changwang and the officials of Hai's 2nd Division very unhappy. A group of true elites had their own dignity. If the enemy couldn't even withstand a single blow, then there would be no challenge at all. For them, this kind of expedition would become a boring thing. Until the scout ship sent by Ma Keqing suddenly appeared, Zhao Changwang, who had been dozing off, opened his eyes wide again. "Division Commander, look at that flag. It's the scout ship of Ma Keqing's pirate group." Should we defeat them and feed them to the fish in the sea? First Division Commander Xianxia stood in the captain's room and asked excitedly. No. Zhao Changwang hurriedly made a hand gesture and said with a look of anticipation, I've heard that Ma Keqing's strength is not bad. It's not easy to see their scout ship. Of course, we have to follow them and find their main force for a decisive battle. Like this, pass down the order. All warships are not to fire. Just follow these scout ships. We have to find the enemy's nest and destroy them in one fell swoop. With the division commander's order, the entire 2ND division's 200 warships quickly moved. They adjusted their direction and followed behind the scout ships towards the west. Originally, Zhao Changwang was worried that the other party was a fast scout ship. If he did not follow them closely, he would lose them. However, when Zhao Changwang found that the other party was not going all out and seemed to be waiting for him, he suddenly had a bad feeling. At the same time, 1st Division Commander Xianxia also felt that something was wrong. He said with concern in his heart, Division Commander, the speed of the scout ship shouldn't be this slow. Do you think they are deliberately leading us there? Originally, he had some doubts in his heart. Now that his subordinate also had the same thought, Zhao Changwang was almost certain of the other party's plan. He nodded and said, What you said is exactly what I was thinking. It seems that the other party is prepared for a decisive battle with us. That's exactly what I was thinking. Tell the fleet to slow down and keep a sufficient distance between each ship. Be prepared to fight at any time. At the same time, report everything that happened here to the headquarters. When it came to such a big battle, Zhao Changwang had to report it. This was originally the rule of Yang Xie's army. When this telegram was sent to the headquarters, Yang Chendong and the 1st Division had just occupied Panay Island. They were checking their harvest here. The telegram was sent to Yang Chendong and the Deputy Commander of the Navy and the 1st Division Commander Gao Xiong. Come on, find out the relevant information about Ma Keqing. Yang Chendong said casually. Beta Persei and a few others quickly sent a thick stack of information to Yang Chendong. This information was provided by the Security Bureau and the CIA. Then the CIA continued to develop, and they already had a certain intelligence system. With 2 departments collecting and providing information at the same time, this would enhance the authenticity of the information and provide a better reference for making correct judgments. Oh, this pirate organization is quite powerful. Looking at the information sent by the 2 intelligence departments at the same time, which was roughly the same. Looking at the numbers above, there were thousands of warships and more than 60,000 soldiers. Yang Chendong couldn't help but be shocked. One must know that the pirate forces were not comparable to other forces. Surviving at sea all year round made their needs greater than on land. Let's put it this way. If a force had 60,000 people on land, it wouldn't be surprising. If it was done well, even a county magistrate could do it. But to have such a huge force at sea, the resources needed were too much. It was enough to show that this was not a small force. Gao Xiong also saw this group of forces, then said worriedly, 6th young master, enough ants can bite an elephant to death. In the face of such a strong enemy, I'm afraid that even if C2nd Division wins, they will have to pay a certain price. It's better to send reinforcements immediately. Reinforcements are needed. Yang Chendong nodded in agreement. Although he was confident in C2nd Division, with the power of their warships and cannons, as long as they were not ambushed in their sleep, they would have the ability to break out of the encirclement. But just passively taking a beating was not his style. The establishment of each C division used a lot of financial and material resources in Raiken City. Any loss would make him feel distressed. How about this? Send a telegram to the C4th Division patrolling the nearby sea area. Let them quickly approach C2nd Division. Don't let them meet up first. Once they find that the enemy is surrounding them, attack them from both inside and outside. 1 C2nd Division and 1 C4th Division. With such a force, even if they were facing a force several times stronger than them, they would still have the ability to counterattack. Yang Chendong gave the order, and Gao Xiong nodded in agreement. Then he asked, the enemy has already made their move. 6th young master, I think we should also hurry up. Everything on Panay Island will be left to the garrison and the people. Should we continue to move forward? Yang Chendong nodded silently, and his eyes fell on Emma Island on the sand table. This time, Daf country went to war without declaring war, killing and injuring so many soldiers and people. If they did not teach them a lesson, wouldn't they be looked down upon by others? Wouldn't anyone dare to provoke them in the future? Sea First Division set sail again, and the fleet headed south. Thousands of nautical miles away in the west, at this moment, ships were also densely packed. The tense atmosphere before the war appeared on every pirate's head, indicating that a life-and-death battle seemed to be about to begin at any time. Compared to the tension of the soldiers below, Ma Keqing, as the leader, was very relaxed. In his opinion, with more than 6 times the number of troops and 5 times the number of warships, the 5-star army had already become his meal, the meat in the bowl. At this time, he consciously ignored 2 problems. Chapter 10-13. First, the strength of the 5-star Navy. Second, the 5-star Navy has an external communication system that he can't understand at all. He thought that after encircling the 5-star army, the other side will become a lone army. He thought that with the advantage of warships and numbers, the other side will not be his opponent. But he didn't know that at this time, the 2nd Sea Division has already contacted the 4th Sea Division. Regarding the decision of the 6th Young Master and the Navy headquarters to send the 4th Sea Division to join forces with them, although Zhao Changwang has some resistance, he thinks that the 2nd Sea Division can win. But considering that the number of warships is not equal, once the other side is defeated, they will likely escape. When he can't chase after them, he still agreed with this decision. It's just that Zhao Changwang thought of the 4th Sea Division as a peripheral force. He didn't think of cooperating with them. He wanted to let the 2nd Sea Division have their own military achievements. And all of this changed because he entered the encirclement. After discovering that the enemy's scout ship was deliberately luring them into the encirclement, Zhao Changwang ordered all the warships to slow down their marching speed and maintain a good alignment. In the end, 3 days later, the 2nd Division, which was tailing the scout ship, finally found the densely packed enemy ships waiting for them on the opposite side of the sea. Looking from afar, there are no less than 400 warships. This powerful lineup fell into Zhao Changwang's eyes, but he didn't have any fear. Instead, he was very excited. Finally, there is a piece of fat meat in front of him. He can eat to his heart's content. But what happened next changed Zhao Changwang's plan of eating alone. After the 2nd Sea Division entered the ambush, a large number of enemy ships appeared in his north, east, and south. No matter which direction he looked at, there were about 200 enemy ships. This is 5 times his own strength. In the face of such a situation, Zhao Changwang first had a fierce struggle in his heart, then he quickly made a decision. He called the telegraph operator and said, "Report the situation in front of us to the 6th Young Master and the Navy headquarters. At the same time, inform the 4th Division of the Sea that all the enemies have appeared. They can move now." Division Commander Xin Xing, who was accompanying the 1st Sea Division, shouted, "Our 2nd Sea Division can eat these enemies. Why are we still asking the 4th Sea Division for help?" The hidden meaning in Xin Xing's words was, why did they have to give half of the credit to others? Regarding this question, Zhao Changwang's answer was, "The fat meat is too big for us, 2nd Division High, to eat it. If we ask 4th Division High for help, not only will we not eat less, we will eat more. At the same time, we can reduce our losses, so why not?" As the division commander, Zhao Changwang had absolute authority over the military affairs of the 2nd Division. Immediately, he had the telegraph operator issue the order. What he didn't expect was that not only did he receive news that the 4th Master Teacher had agreed to make a move, he even received praise from the 6th Young Master. The general gist of the telegram was that Zhao Changwang had always looked at the big picture and had truly integrated sincerity and unity into actual combat. Very good. The 6th Young Master was very happy and personally rewarded Commander Zhao with a box of bugnam of Gojosian cigarettes and 100 jars of good wine. Considering the quantity of cigarettes produced, cigarettes became one of the most sought-after goods. Because of the high consumption, even the generals in the army received a monthly quota. As for the Wunan Ace brand that had just been released, it was the best among them. It was not inferior to the influence of the current Zhonghua cigarettes. A box of cigarettes and 100 jars of good wine were given out at once. This kind of reward was sent to the entire Xianxia army through the telegram. Remember, it was the entire Xianxia army. It wasn't limited to the 1st Division High, nor was it limited to the entire navy of the 2nd Division High. As long as one was in the Xianxia army, they were notified of this news. For a moment, while everyone was envious of these benefits, they were even more envious of 2nd Division Commander Zhao Changwang. To be able to receive such a reward from the 6th young master, needless to say, he had already been taken seriously. Could be imagined that in the future he would have a meteoric rise. Why did Yang Chendong do this? It was very simple to say. He used this proof to tell all the senior officers how important it was to be united. As long as you have the big picture in mind, even if you didn't achieve much, you would get more points than if you acted alone. Zhao Changwang was shocked by this telegram, but soon he was very excited. But when the excitement passed, he began to ponder the meaning of this matter. So, after he thought it through, 2nd Division High didn't immediately counterattack. Instead, they continued to drill into the middle of the encirclement. Since he already knew that he was surrounded, it was equivalent to knowing the opponent's plan. Zhao Changwang wasn't in a hurry. He wanted to wait and see, not to see if the opponent had any tricks up their sleeves, but to buy time for 3rd Division High to reach the designated target. 2nd Division High was surrounded, but they didn't immediately escape. Instead, they continued to move forward, towards the center of the battlefield. This also made Ma Keqing, who was about to give the order to attack, hesitate. This also made Prime Minister Ferdinand, who was following the army, unable to understand. Shouldn't a normal person run away immediately when encountering such a situation? If they didn't enter the center of the encirclement, even if they had to pay a big price to escape, there was still hope for them to break through. But once they entered the center of the battlefield, even if they wanted to escape with a ship, it would be harder than ascending to the heavens. The 5-star army knew this, but why were they still so close to the center of the battlefield? Puzzled, the two gathered together to think about it. Because if they didn't understand this problem, they would never be at ease. Very quickly, the two of them came to a consensus. The reason Teacher Hai's 2nd Regiment did this must be due to their arrogance. In other words, the 5-star army was very arrogant. They probably didn't think highly of these pirates, so they dared to take the risk. It was no wonder that the two of them thought this way. According to the information obtained from the scout ship that followed 2nd Division High, ever since they discovered each other, 2nd Division High's ships didn't leave. Then, after 3 days of pursuit, 2nd Division High's ships had already entered the encirclement. Faced with this extremely accurate information, it could only mean one thing. 2nd Division High didn't have any reinforcements, and they didn't have any reinforcements. If this wasn't arrogance, then what was it? Everyone says that the 5-star army is very strong, but I haven't seen it yet. Now, I see their arrogant side. Very good, since they don't put others in their eyes, then don't blame me for being merciless. Use the flag to tell the other ships not to be in a hurry to attack, and let the enemy move. At the same time, shrink the encirclement and wait for the enemy to appear in the center of the battlefield before attacking together. Ma Keqing was furious. He was angered by the arrogance of 2nd Division High. In the past, whenever an enemy was surrounded by him, which one of them didn't panic? They would flee in a hurry, and it would be difficult for them to even display 50% of their usual strength. However, 2nd Division High actually did the opposite, and didn't put his encirclement in their eyes. Since it was like this, why would he be polite? He would just give them a good beating. After the order was given, 2nd Division High unhurriedly moved towards the center of the battlefield under the encirclement of thousands of ships. During this period, their speed was very slow, but they kept moving forward, so the pirates didn't have any other ideas. In any case, it was impossible for them to go out and report. Since that was the case, why should they worry about them escaping? Thus, the next half of the day passed in this kind of dawdling. 20 hours later, the 4th Division High sent a message that they had arrived at the designated location. They could enter the battlefield at any time after 2nd Division High fired their first shot. The 2nd Division High's commander, Zhao Changwang, ordered the entire division to prepare for battle. In these 20 hours, other than the necessary personnel on duty, the rest of the 2nd Division Cold Front officers and soldiers were resting and sleeping in their cabins. But all the veterans knew that the more the battle, the more it was important to maintain enough physical strength. Only in this way could they perform better on the battlefield. After 20 hours of rest, the officers and soldiers were full of spirit and energy. The moment the division headquarters gave the order, the 4 regiments immediately separated, with the division headquarters as the center, guarding the east, south, west, and north, guarding the 4 directions. This was called the 4 directions defensive formation, and it was often practiced during exercises. But this was the first time it was used, and it was also the first time in the history of the 5-star Navy that a division was surrounded. The 4 directions defensive formation was completed in less than half an hour. When the pirates more than 10 miles away discovered their abnormality and began to approach them, the 4 regiments were ready to attack. As the 2nd Marine Division, which was composed entirely of cold front soldiers, other than the transport ships, all the ships were equipped with 100mm mortars. The advantage of this cannon was that it was small, easy to carry, and easy to move. It could be placed at the bow, middle, or stern of the ship, and could be adjusted according to the direction of the enemy. Moreover, the shortest attack range was 13 miles, and it could be used to kill enemies from a long distance. As for the divisions, they were equipped with 5 level 4 warships. Among them, there was 1 for the division headquarters and 1 for each of the 4 regiments. All of the Class 4 warships were equipped with Type 61 100mm single-barreled naval cannons. Firing rate, 12 rounds/minute, range, 22. 5 kilometers, against the sea, 14 kilometers, against the air, elevation, 85 degrees, weight, 15. 9 kilograms, muzzle velocity, 895 meters per second. This type of 100mm naval cannon was produced after Yang Chendong took out the finished product from the warehouse, and the Crimson City shipyard gathered countless manpower and resources to research it for 3 years before they succeeded. This type of naval cannon could fire up to 45 nautical miles away, and was currently the strongest cannon developed by the Crimson City shipyard and munitions factory. Chapter 1014. With the production of the 100mm single-barrel cannon, the shipyard and munitions factory in Crimson City also mastered more high-end technology. It is conceivable that under the promotion of Yang Xie's books and knowledge, more and more advanced cannons will be introduced in the future. On the Level 4 warship where Zhao Changwang was on, there was a 100mm single-barrel cannon at the moment. At this time, the cannon barrel was aimed at the pirate group rushing towards them, eager to fire. Report the distance. Zhao Changwang picked up the advanced binoculars used by the division commander in his hand and looked at the sea in the distance while asking. Reporting to division commander, the enemy ship is 10 nautical miles away from us. Wait a little longer. When he heard the distance of 10 nautical miles, Zhao Changwang put down the binoculars and said in a leisurely manner. Although the distance of 10 miles was within the range of all artillery fire, Yang Chendong still didn't give the order to attack immediately. He already learned from the intelligence that the strongest artillery in the west only has a range of 3 miles. As long as they fire outside this range, the initiative is still in their hands. Moreover, once they start fighting, facing such a powerful artillery, Zhao Changwang can't predict how the other party will react. What if they can't withstand the force and turn around to escape? If they run and run, it is very likely that they will rush out of the range of the 100mm mortar 13 miles. If this is the case, relying only on the cannons of the 4 Level 4 warships, the effect won't be too good, so he has to wait a little longer. Reporting to division commander, the enemy ship is 8 miles away from us. Reporting to division commander, the enemy ship is 6 miles away from us. Order all ships to aim at the target and fire. After hearing the distance of 6 miles, Zhao Changwang didn't hesitate anymore. If he doesn't fire now, It will give the enemy a chance to rush in front of him. Once the enemy can suppress him with artillery fire, the loss at that time is inevitable. After the order was issued, the command flag fluttered on the strings of the division headquarters, then the first cannonball was fired. It was the level 4 warship that Zhao Changwang was on. The cannonball whizzed out of the barrel, landing directly in the midst of the approaching pirate ships. Boom! The cannonball whizzed out. Since it had already locked on to its target, it was the first to hit its target. It hit a large ship among the pirate ships with more than 300 people on board. Then, it was lit up with flames and ammunition splattered in all directions. The pirate ship, which was completely unprepared, was hit. The hull of the ship began to crack, and countless crew members were killed or injured by the explosion. Miserable screams rose and fell in succession. This hellish scene was just the beginning. Following that, countless cannons roared and countless shells flew out of Division High's warships, rushing towards the enemy ships 6 miles away. Some of the cannonballs were very accurate and could easily destroy an enemy's small warship with a single shot. Some of the cannonballs were not accurate and would cause a huge wave when they landed on the surface of the sea, causing the nearby pirate crew members to cry out in fright, their eyes filled with fear. As pirates, they were used to threatening others, robbing others, and then watching others show fear in the face of danger. However, when everything was about to happen to them, they realized how dangerous it was. They realized that their qualities were not much better than those who had been robbed before. In fact, some of them were even worse than those who had been robbed before. Cannonballs sounded one after another without any signs of stopping. Although the speed at which Crimson City's munitions factory produced cannonballs was still very slow, it had been 6 years since the establishment of the Navy. It had been nearly a year since the successful development of the cannonballs. There hadn't been any major battles, so the stockpile of cannonballs was still very large. It wouldn't be a problem to use them for several large-scale naval battles. Cannonballs continued to roar. In the depths of the pirate ships, the confidence on Ma Keqing's face had long disappeared. He was loudly asking about the distance between him and the 5-star army. He couldn't believe it. How could the enemy fire a cannonball from such a distance and hit him? All of this was beyond his imagination. To be able to dominate a region and become a pirate organization that Abu Bakr didn't hesitate to recruit, Ma Keqing was very confident in himself. Every day, he saw scenes of the strong devouring the weak. He clearly understood the importance of weapons. For this reason, he didn't hesitate to buy cannons from a passing Western fleet at a high price. Those cannons could fire up to 2.5 miles away. It was definitely a very powerful weapon at that time. Although he also knew that some Western fleets had cannons that could fire up to 3 miles away, he also knew that they would never sell them. Otherwise, wouldn't it mean that they had the possibility to threaten the enemy? But even if it was 3 miles away, once it encountered his wolf-pack tactics, it was destined to end in failure. Before the battle, he thought that the 5-star army's cannons could only fire up to 3 miles away. It was because of this that he dared to mobilize all of his forces to surround the enemy. But he didn't expect that the enemy would fire from 6 miles away and give him such a heavy blow. Moreover, it didn't seem like there was only one cannon, but countless. This result made Ma Keqing somewhat unable to accept. At this moment, he was already regretting his decision to become enemies with the 5-star army. Prime Minister Ferdinand, the special envoy sent by Abuber, was also unable to accept it. He had come here to see how the 5-star naval division was surrounded and annihilated, not to see how they were defeated. So when he saw that the enemy had already fired and started to damage the pirate ships, he couldn't help but ask Ma Keqing, "Brother Ma, why didn't you give the order to return fire?" Ferdinand was a civil official after all, so he naturally didn't have a certain understanding of the cannons on the ships. In his opinion, the more ships the pirates had, the more cannons they had. Since the enemy had already fired, all they had to do was return fire. At most, both sides would suffer. Ma Keqing, who was already in a bad mood, saw that Ferdinand dared to question him and immediately said with a face full of anger, "Return fire? Our cannons can't hit the enemy at all, how can we return fire?" Don't tell me that the 5-star army's firearms are already so advanced. Ferdinand finally understood and casually said a sentence to remind Ma Keqing. Previously, he said that to the pirates, the greatest benefit wasn't the 500,000 taels of silver given by King Abu Bakr, but the powerful firearms and cannons of the 5-star army. Regarding this, Ma Keqing heard it, but didn't pay much attention to it. But now, he finally understood the meaning of this sentence, and a bold idea spontaneously rose. The enemy's cannons are really good. If I can use them, then won't I be able to casually attack the Western merchant ships passing by here? When that time comes, won't my wealth be inexhaustible? As if he was asking himself, and also as if he had sunk into a crazed state after a burst of laughter, Ma Keqing suddenly turned around and shouted to his subordinates beside him, "Use the flag to tell everyone, don't be afraid of the enemy's cannons, charge forward bravely. As long as we can advance 3 li, victory will belong to us. When that time comes, we will have even more powerful cannons. When that time comes, no one in this sea area will be our match." Ma Keqing's shout also stimulated his subordinates, and they shouted loudly as they went out to spread the news. This gave direction to the pirate ships that were already in chaos. To be able to become pirates and survive well, this originally proved that they were superior to ordinary people. Not to mention, for a great pirate like Ma Keqing to be able to organize a formation of 60,000 men, it was enough to prove his strength and the strength of his subordinates. Initially, facing the sudden attack of the Second Sea Fleet, they were indeed stunned. That was because they were not prepared and did not know that there were cannons that could shoot so far. In addition, Ma Keqing did not give any new orders, so they could only wait in panic. Now that there was a new order, some ships quickly adjusted their direction and continued to move forward despite the danger of being hit by the cannons. At this moment, through the binoculars, one could even see the red faces of many people. It was the face of someone who would do anything to achieve their goal. It was the face of a desperado. Reporting to the division commander, after the initial panic, the enemy has begun to approach us. A division commander on the same ship, Xin Xing, put down his binoculars and looked at the division commander Zhao Changwang. Zhao Changwang was also shocked by the opponent's fearlessness. But to be able to become the division commander of the Cold Vanguard, which one of them was not a person with an extremely strong mentality. After a moment of sighing, he ordered, "Order all warships to adjust their direction, be sure to control the enemy's warships 3 li away." Not only did he want to win, he also wanted to not suffer any losses. This was where Zhao Changwang's ambition lay. Although it was said to be ambition, under the advantage of powerful cannons, who could say that this was an impossible task? The Second Sea Fleet began to change their target. They began to fire at the ships that were trying to get close to them. For a time, within a distance of 4 to 5 li, gunfire filled the sky. One after another, enemy ships were sunk. On the vast sea, countless small black dots floated on the water, calling for help from nearby ships. Compared to some other forces, pirates seemed to be more fearless of death. Even if the ships in front of them were sunk one by one, there were still more ships coming one after another behind them. They were like a one-track mind. Once they set their sights on their target, they would never let go, even if they knew that it was very dangerous. A fluke mentality existed in everyone's heart. They seemed to believe that they would be one of the ships that would be lucky enough to reach the 5-star admiral. Therefore, everyone was taking risks and everyone was facing failure. Chapter 10:15. Everyone advance. I don't believe that they can defend so well. On the pirate ship, Ma Keqing's eyes were red with anger. It wasn't because of lack of sleep, but because he was anxious and impatient. Ma Keqing had experienced hundreds of battles in his life. Some of them were as dangerous as today's battle, so he was still betting. He bet that with the advantage of numbers, he could win in the end. However, all of this was disrupted and defeated by another piece of news that came out of nowhere. All the pirate ships continued to advance according to his orders, especially the fast scout ships. Although they didn't have any offensive capabilities, they had the advantage of being extremely fast. Once such ships appeared, it was really difficult to be targeted by the cannons. They became the first pirate ships to reach the 3-mile mark. Finally, there was a ship that entered the 3-li radius. This was equivalent to giving the other pirate ships a shot in the arm. For a time, the other ships were influenced by this and also madly accelerated. It was as if they wanted to rely on their numbers to win. But at this moment, when their hearts were filled with hope, suddenly a large number of cannons roared behind them. Then, more ships with the 5-star red flag joined the fray. They were the Sea's 4th Division that was ordered to come to the rescue. At the beginning of the war, the Sea's 4th Division was ordered to patrol this area to prevent people from taking risks and attacking the coast of Cambodia that had just been conquered by Xianxia. It was because of the special position of the Sea's 4th Division that Yang Chendong gave them the opportunity to participate in the war. When he received the order, the commander of the Sea's 4th Division, Ding Yen, was naturally very excited. He immediately left the 4th Division to continue patrolling, while the other 3 divisions and a division's battalion headed straight for the designated area. The cooperation of the Sea's 2nd Division bought them time, and they finally arrived in time for the battle. They finally appeared when the battle was at its climax, and then they dealt a heavy blow to the unprepared pirate ships. The sudden appearance of the Sea's 4th Division caught the pirate ships off guard. When the cannons fell again, the pirate ships were horrified to find that it wasn't the enemy that was being surrounded, but themselves. What was even more frightening was that the 5-star army's ships had appeared out of nowhere. Their cannons were spreading out in a very irregular manner. They had actually discovered that there was no safe zone in this area of the sea. Unlike the previous Naval Division High's 2nd Naval Division, they first attacked the leading ships of the pirate ships, then attacked the ships that wanted to come within 3 miles of them. This way, as long as they didn't charge at the front, they wouldn't be in danger of being hit by the cannons. This was also the reason why a large number of pirate ships didn't panic. The appearance of Hai's 4th Military Division broke this rule. When no area was safe, some people with weak wills began to waver. Not all of the 60,000 pirates were elites. Only 20,000 of them were truly loyal to Ma Keqing. The remaining 2/3 were only here to make up the numbers and temporarily find a place to stay. Such a person would naturally have no problem fighting a smooth battle, but once they encountered a serious obstacle, their mentality would collapse at any time. Just like when Hai's 4th Military Division suddenly appeared and gave a heavy blow, the mentality of many pirates began to collapse. The direct result was that some of the more courageous people, those who valued their lives, suddenly separated from the group of pirate ships and directly fled to the distance. Some things can be contagious. Just like on the battlefield, when everyone is rushing to advance, as a member, you will consciously or involuntarily follow them. On the contrary, if someone starts to flee, your brain will also be affected. Under the herd mentality, you will even have the same reaction and turn around to escape. Even more people don't know why they fled. You are like the current situation on the surface of the sea. Once the first pirate ship escapes, there will be a second, a third, a fourth, until there are more and more of them, affecting the mentality of more people and more ships. The sudden appearance of the escaping ships in the army, and the trend of more and more ships appearing, this scene was seen by Ma Keqing on the command ship. He had a very bad feeling. It must be said that he had seen this kind of thing many times, but usually it was the enemy escaping. This was the first time that his subordinates had escaped. He, who had no experience in dealing with this, actually didn't know what to do now. On the other hand, Ferdinand, who was following the army, saw that there were ships that were about to escape and immediately said angrily, "Quick, stop them, sink them. No matter what, we can't let this situation spread, or else it will destroy our army." Yes, immediately do as the Prime Minister said. Ma Keqing, who was reminded, also thought of something. He wasn't afraid of the ships escaping, but he was afraid that everyone would follow suit. If that happened, he would quickly become a commander without an army, and that would be really dangerous. Therefore, the pirates who had been beaten up finally had the chance to fire their cannons. However, their target wasn't the 5-star Army's naval division, but their own people. The sound of the cannons rang out, hitting the escaping ships one after another. This scene was tantamount to a resounding slap to the other people's faces, which was equivalent to telling everyone that the consequences of fleeing in the face of a battle were tragic. This method of killing the chicken to warn the monkey had a certain effect, and for a moment, the wind of fleeing in the face of a battle was suppressed. This chaos gave the 2nd Sea Division a chance to counterattack. Originally, some of the ships were already 4 miles away, and it looked like they would be a threat if they continued to charge forward. First, there was the sudden arrival of the 4th Sea Division, which attracted the attention of the other party. Then, there were some pirate ships that wanted to escape, which shook the pirate army's determination to attack. Under these 2 sudden changes, the pirate ships' speed slowed down. The only ones that really rushed over were the scout ships that didn't have cannons and were closer to the enemy. Ships like these that came alone couldn't pose any threat to the 2nd Sea Division at all. Every 5-star Army's battleship only needed to send a squad of soldiers armed with the Type 95 to close in and strafe. Facing the pirates who were still armed with bows and arrows, after a few rounds, more than half of them were killed. They didn't even have the chance to shine before they were completely annihilated. Taking advantage of the delay in the enemy's attack, the 2nd Sea Division's cannons began to extend and unceasingly fired shells. Together with the 4th Sea Division, they attacked the pirate ships from the front and back. Finally, there wasn't a single safe spot left on the battlefield. Countless pirates could only watch helplessly as their companion ships were struck and sunk into the sea. As they screamed for help, the fear in their hearts grew stronger with each wave. Finally, the matter of fleeing once again occurred. This time, the number of ships that escaped was much higher than the previous few. There were dozens of ships and even hundreds of ships. When it became a general trend, the so-called stopping would no longer play a decisive role. There were even some ships that took the initiative to open fire on the pirate ships that tried to stop them from escaping. Thus, the internal strife began. When everything entered Ma Keqing's eyes, he knew that it was all over. Seeing his ships being sunk at every moment, or being hit by the 5-star army, or being hit by his own people, his many years of hard work suffered a heavy blow today. His face was extremely ugly. At this moment, Ferdinand's voice came from the side. "Brother Ma, this can't go on. We have to think of a way." A way? If he didn't hear this sentence, he wouldn't be so angry. After hearing this sentence, Ma Keqing's eyes spat out flames of anger. "It's all because of you? If it wasn't for you, my army wouldn't have suffered such heavy losses. Tell me, how are you going to compensate me?" Compensate? Didn't we already give you 500,000 taels of silver? Now that we haven't dealt a heavy blow to the 5-star army, even our king can't give you any more benefits. Ferdinand shook his head and spoke the truth. At this moment, he didn't know what kind of consequences these words would bring him. 500,000 taels? My losses are so great, is 500,000 taels of silver enough to compensate for them? Let me tell you, give me another 1 million taels of silver. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless. His face was full of anger, and every word seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth. 1 million? No. Even if you kill me, you won't get it. Ferdinand heard Ma Keqing's demand and shook his head continuously. Is that so? Then I'll kill you. Men, kill this culprit in public. Ma Keqing, who was in a fit of anger, said without any trace of politeness. Once the order was given, 2 pirates walked forward, one on the left and one on the right, and carried Ferdinand out of the cabin. Ma Keqing didn't even look at him, but used a decisive tone to say to the flag-bearer beside him, "Pass down the order, retreat. All troops retreat towards the Sumatra Sea." This was the saying of a brave warrior cutting his wrist. Knowing that they weren't a match for the 5-star army, they would just flee. Wasn't there an old saying, where there's life, there's hope? The scene of cannon fire was still playing out on the sea. Once the order to retreat was given, the situation became even more chaotic. The pirate ships were like street rats that everyone wanted to beat, frantically fleeing in all directions. This was the so-called "a defeated army collapses like a mountain." Continue the cannon fire, kill as many as you can. Seeing the enemy ships in chaos, not thinking of attacking but instead fleeing, the commander of the C-2nd Division, Zhao Changwang, decisively gave the order to extend the cannon fire. Immediately, the cannons that were originally aimed at the enemy ships in front of them began to extend, blasting towards a distance of 6 li. They originally thought that since they were far away from the 5-star army, there wouldn't be any danger. At this moment, they realized that the enemy wasn't using their full strength. Seeing the enemy's cannons smash one after another onto the warships beside him, Ma Keqing's face changed again. Originally, he wanted to maintain the formation and retreat, but now he couldn't care less. Ignoring the people around him, he turned the ship around and fled. Chapter 10:16. Naval battles were different from land battles. It wasn't as if you could just aim at a target and it would be difficult for the enemy to escape. Just like now, as Ma Keqing's ship continued to accelerate and change direction, it was very difficult to lock onto him. As for chasing after him, it was even more impossible. This area of the sea was filled with destroyed ships. There were also some ships that surrendered because they were too cowardly. They blocked the way and also blocked the 5-star army's path to chase after Ma Keqing. Ma Keqing escaped and the battle finally ended before the sky turned dark. This battle on the ship, which lasted for more than 10 hours, had greatly destroyed the strength of this pirate leader. According to the post-battle statistics, there were more than 300 ships that were destroyed in this battle. There were about 100 ships that collided with each other during the escape. About 300 ships surrendered, but there were less than 300 ships that actually escaped. Moreover, they escaped in all directions. In the end, there were only 200 ships that escaped with Ma Keqing to his old base in Sumantala. This battle established the foundation of the 5-star army's invincibility at sea. As the escaping ships continued to spread the news, not long after, all the forces at sea knew that the 5-star army had a type of cannon that could attack from a very long distance. From then on, wherever the 5-star army appeared, the enemy would flee at the sight of them and not dare to fight. When the sky turned dark, the 2nd and 4th Naval Division's telegrams of victory were sent to Yang Chendong. Good, commendation, commendation. Yang Chendong's face revealed a carefree smile when he saw that Hai's 2nd Division and Hai's 4th Division were unscathed. The vice commander of the Navy, Gao Xiong, also had a proud smile on his face. 6th Young Master, this is all thanks to our advanced weapons. Knowledge is power. This is the perfect embodiment. If it weren't for the combined efforts of the munitions factory and the shipyard, we wouldn't have been able to achieve such a great victory. How about this? At the same time, send a telegram to the Crimson City Palace and the City Lord's mansion to commend the researchers in the city. Taking advantage of the situation, Yang Chendong intentionally raised the value of the intellectuals. Regarding this, the other officers naturally did not have any doubts. Facts spoke louder than words. In this battle, the advantage of advanced weaponry was perfectly demonstrated. They should be commended. When the news of the battle outside of Palawan reached Crimson City, there was a sudden surge of technology. Many ambitious youths applied for the first academy of the Yang family in Crimson City, hoping to learn some advanced knowledge so that they could serve Yang Xie in the future. The consequences of this battle weren't limited to this. Hundreds of pirate ships fled to various places in panic. The news of the 5-star army's naval artillery being abnormally powerful quickly spread out. Some of the forces and organizations that originally wanted to compete with the 5-star army became hesitant. In particular, the pirates who escaped deliberately began to exaggerate the power of the 5-star army in order to prove their innocence. They took the initiative to say that their artillery could hit more than 10 miles away, dozens of miles away, or even hundreds of miles away. In the islands controlled by the Big F country, there were ships leaving every day to break away from the control of the Big F country. They just didn't want to be enemies with the 5-star army and not become their next target. Taking advantage of this east wind, the 3 navies went south and subdued several islands. 10 days later, the 3 divisions of the First Sea Army appeared in the outer waters of Ang Island and surrounded the island from 3 sides. In order to avoid unnecessary losses, Yang Chendong used the strategy of encircling 3 sides and blocking 1 side. This gave the other side a glimmer of hope to prevent the enemy from fighting to the death. The Big F country's capital, Marilag City, was adjacent to Davao Bay in the future. There was a large port here where the 500 ships that belonged to Abu Bakr were docked. This was also the power that belonged to him and was also the last power in Abu Bakr's hands. The news of Ma Keqing's defeat was spread a few days ago. When he heard this news, Abu Bakr's face was full of disbelief, and then he felt as if he was sitting on pins and needles. He didn't really believe the rumor that the 5-star army had artillery that could hit more than 100 miles away. He thought that this was an exaggeration. However, the fact that the 5-star army had artillery that was different from others could be proven. Who was Ma Keqing? He had joined the pirates in his youth and later on became a giant of a region. He had fought countless naval battles. If it wasn't for the powerful artillery of the 5-star army, how could they lose so quickly and so miserably? According to this, if Ma Keqing wasn't a match, then he naturally wasn't a match either. Right now, the wisest choice was to run away. However, as a merchant, Abu Bakr was filled with gambling spirit and wanted to gamble again. Abu Bakr didn't choose to leave right away. He sent an envoy to negotiate with the 5-star army. In his eyes, money was omnipotent. He wanted to use silver to buy his life. However, this time, he offered 2 million taels of silver. He didn't believe that the 5-star army wouldn't be moved. If it was any other organization or power, they definitely wouldn't turn a blind eye to 2 million taels of silver. However, in Yang Chendong's eyes, it wasn't much. At the very least, he wouldn't stop his military plans just because of this amount of silver. Since the war had reached this level, it was inevitable that he would seize the opportunity to reclaim the Big F archipelago. Facing the envoy sent by Abu Bakr, Yang Chendong harshly denounced Abu Bakr's crimes. He said that the Big F country attacking Luzon port for no reason was simply a provocation and a challenge. The 5-star army wasn't afraid of any challenge. This time, the 5-star army's revenge was extremely righteous. It was impossible for them to retreat. As the king of the Big F country, Abu Bakr, who made a mistake, had to immediately surrender and accept the trial of the dead soldiers and families of the people in Luzon. After rejecting the offer of silver taels for peace talks, the emissary returned to Immortal Island dejectedly. After that, the entire island went into a defensive posture. The 500 warships in the harbor also took advantage of the harbor to hide, giving people the impression that they were sharp blades in their sheaths, ready to be drawn at any moment to take people's lives. Not only that, Abu Bakr also issued a request for help in the name of the king of the Big F country. He said that no matter who it was, as long as they could help him defeat the 5-star army, he would reward them with 5 million taels of silver. As soon as this news came out, some of the large and small forces in the nearby waters became restless. 5 million taels of silver was definitely not a small amount. As the saying goes, people die for wealth. This naturally aroused the greed of some people. The 5-star army was about to become the target of public criticism. This is not normal. This is definitely not normal. In the cabin of the War God No. 1 warship, Yang Chendong looked at the collected information from all sides and frowned. Abu Bakr's provocation this time did make Yang Chendong a little angry. However, as he took the opportunity to fight and continuously occupied many islands, his anger was not as strong as before. Instead, he had to thank the other party for giving him a legitimate excuse to send out troops. In Yang Chendong's eyes, Abu Bakr wasn't someone who had to die. He also didn't want to leave a tyrannical impression on the other forces after this battle. Giving Abu Bakr a way out would give him a better reputation. In his mind, once the negotiations broke down, the other party would have some common sense and should have fled. This way, the island would be in his hands and the war would be over. However, not only did the other party not leave, but they also showed a look of fighting to the death. Their funds even increased from the original 2 million taels to 5 million taels. With all these abnormal changes, Yang Chendong began to have doubts in his heart. As the saying goes, if things are abnormal, there must be a demon. If people are abnormal, there must be a knife. There must be something that he didn't understand. Otherwise, Abu Bakr wouldn't have chosen to defend the island and would have fled long ago. Investigate. Send a telegram to the Security Bureau and CIA members on the island. They must find out what made Abu Burkle not avoid the battle and insist on fighting to the death. Since he couldn't figure it out, he might as well give the task to someone who could complete it. Putting aside the doubts in his heart for the time being, the deputy commander of the Navy, Gao Xiong, asked, 6th Young Master, the 2nd Division and the 3rd Division have sent a telegram asking when to launch the general attack on the island? There's no need to rush. Let's wait and see if there are people who are willing to sacrifice their lives for money. If there are, we'll take advantage of this battle to finish them off, Yang Chendong said unhurriedly. He had heard that Abu Burkle had offered 5 million taels of silver for help. He wanted to see if there was really someone who would make an enemy out of him for the sake of money. If there was, such a person would definitely be a hidden danger. It would be better to eliminate him as soon as possible. Knowing that the 6th young master was going to fish, Gao Xiong agreed and turned around to take position. He needed to send out some small reconnaissance ships to check the surrounding waters so that if something happened he could react in advance. Laosa's provincial capital, Wanxiang City. For a while, the provincial commander, He Guang, had been feeling uneasy. His bodyguard captain, Yan Jiang, had been missing for more than a month. Even though he had sent many people to investigate, there was still no news. His intuition told him that something must have happened. He had no choice but to report the matter to the provincial governor, Luan Shaochen. Luan Shaochen also knew Yan Jiang. Many times, He Guang had sent him to deliver important documents. He felt that Yan Jiang was a very upright person. His identity was also special. Luan Shaochen felt that Yan Jiang must have discovered something. His disappearance wouldn't be so simple. Daring to attack the bodyguard captain of a Laos general, needless to say, this was not a small matter. Luan Shaochen immediately handed over the task to the Security Bureau's branch in Laos. Just 7 days later, the Security Bureau sent back news that Yan Jiang and the 6 bodyguards were last seen in Hai Qing's residence. Chapter 1017. It had to be said that Hai Qing was quite capable. Ever since Yan Jiang was killed, he had tried his best to plant a spy in the Laos provincial government. When the Security Bureau reported this situation, it just so happened that Luan Shaochen wasn't there. The matter happened to be learned by this informant. He didn't even ask for leave and went straight to Hai Qing's mansion to pass the news. After more than a month of preparation, Hai Qing and Siam's special envoy, Dulalong, had made some preparations for the rebellion. According to Dulalong, Siam had already mobilized its troops and one of them was heading towards Wanxiang City in Laos. His mission was to find a way to control Luan Shaochen and He Guang and cause internal strife. It was also at this time that the planted informant came and reported the results of the Security Bureau's investigation. Hai Qing was shocked. Dulalong, who also heard the news, slammed his right fist on the table and said, "We can't wait any longer. We have to make the first move." "Okay, I'll bring people to He Guang's residence and make a move. I'll have to trouble the special envoy to make a move on Luan Shaochen." Hai Qing knew that he had no way out. If he did not make the first move, he would not be able to survive. Time was tight and the two of them did not have time to make any more preparations. They gathered 100 men of sacrifice and Hai Qing brought half of them to General He Guang's residence. He Guang did not know anything about this. When he was in his residence, he suddenly received news that his deputy general, Hai Qing, had something important to discuss with him. He Guang did not think much about this deputy general and ordered him to come in. In the main hall, Hai Qing appeared with a nervous expression. When he saw that there were 2 bodyguards in the hall, he said hesitantly, "General, regarding Captain Yan Jiang's disappearance, your subordinate has already found out the reason." Hearing that it was about Yan Jiang, He Guang's expression turned serious. He then waved his hand and dismissed the 2 guards. He said, "Okay, there is no one else here. General Hai, you can tell me what happened." "General, the situation is like this," Hai Qing said as he walked closer to He Guang. "Actually, I killed Captain Yan Jiang with my own hands." As soon as he finished speaking, a sharp knife stabbed into He Guang's body, causing blood to flow out. He Guang, who had been stabbed in the abdomen, couldn't help but take a few steps back. He covered his abdomen with his hand and glared at Hai Qing. Why? I've always treated you well. You could even say that I trusted you a lot. Why are you treating me like this? You can only blame your head for being too valuable. I couldn't help but be tempted. Alright, today is the day you die. Hand over your life. After laughing maniacally, Hai Qing once again took a big step forward, wanting to stab at the fatal spot. However, a black hole suddenly appeared in front of him and closed in a flash. His target, He Guang, had also disappeared. This secret passage was He Guang's life-saving place. After all, he had defected to Xianxia. In the former Navy-tied nation, who knew how many people wanted to kill him? Just in case, he had made this kind of preparation. He didn't expect it to save his life at such a crucial moment. With his target gone, Hai Qing's mind went blank. Although he didn't kill He Guang this time, He Guang was severely injured. He wouldn't be able to do anything for a while. The result was no different from killing him. Hai Qing's lips curled into a smile again. He walked out of the general's residence quietly and rushed to the barracks. As the main general, He Guang, wasn't around, Hai Qing began to gather all the generals in the army. What he needed to do next was to kill all the officers who opposed him. Without a leader, the soldiers would be powerless to resist the army of Siam. On the other side, Dou Lilong led 50 men of sacrifice to ambush Luan Shaochen on the path he had to pass every day. When the time came, he saw a sedan approaching from afar. Standing around the palanquin were 10 soldiers in green military uniforms. Dou Lilong, who had done his research, knew that Luan Shaochen was highly valued by Yang Chendong. He had sent the most elite soldiers, Lung Feng, to guard him. Dou Lilong didn't dare to be careless when dealing with such a person. Hence, he had prepared beforehand. He placed baskets of chili powder on the roofs along the way. Seeing that the target had entered the encirclement, he immediately blew a whistle. The chili powder flew in all directions and landed on the top of the sedan. In that instant, the 10 guards who were raising their heads were splashed with chili powder. The extremely destructive chili powder entered their eyes and noses, causing them to lose the ability to fight in an instant. Before they had the chance to open their eyes, dozens of black-clothed men surged out from all directions. After a series of chaotic slashes, the 10 guards were bathed in blood on the streets. Go! Seeing that he was about to succeed, Dou Lilong's eyes were filled with excitement. He waved his hand and the men in black rushed to the sedan and opened the curtains. What happened next was a shocking scene. There was no one in the sedan. What's going on? There was no one in the sedan. Dou Lilong was very surprised. He stepped forward and checked carefully. When he confirmed that it was indeed an empty sedan, he had a bad feeling. He looked around and found that it wasn't a trap. He couldn't figure it out and had people clean up the scene. Then he quickly left with his men of sacrifice. It was late at night. In the high mansion, Hai Qing had invited 17 military officers. Among them, there were 3 Lao's regiment commanders. The rest were battalion commanders and company commanders. They were all people with real power. All of them had been invited to this event. Good wine and good dishes were served. After 3 rounds of wine and 5 dishes, Dou Lilong rushed back and nodded at Hai Qing outside the hall. This was equivalent to a signal for him to act. Hai Qing understood and nodded. Then he coughed a few times. Then, dozens of men of sacrifice with swords appeared around the hall. They attacked without any explanation. The 17 officers who were completely unprepared and had no weapons in their hands died tragically on the spot. Up until the moment of their deaths, these officers still did not understand why Hai Qing would attack them. What was going on? The hall was still filled with the pungent smell of blood. Dou Lilong had already walked in. He first looked at the corpses in the hall and nodded with satisfaction. Very good, these are the people who led the troops. Once they die, the entire camp will die. Well done. Hai Qing didn't care about this. He was more concerned about Luan Shaochen's death. Truth be told, although this person was very young, he was very skillful in doing things. In just 4 years, he had grasped the power of the entire Lao province in his hands. Even with Hai Qing's status, whenever he saw this person, he couldn't help but feel afraid. It was like a mountain pressing down on his head. If this person didn't die, he wouldn't have the confidence to rebel. How is it? Is he dead? He's dead, he replied in a firm tone. Although Dolong didn't know why there was no one in the sedan, he didn't intend to tell Haiqing. Now was the time to rebel and he couldn't be distracted by anything. After hearing the news of Luan Xiaoqin's death, Haiqing heaved a sigh of relief. Then, Dolong asked, "Did you kill He Guang?" "Killed him," Haiqing, who also had a cunning mind, replied. He thought that He Guang wouldn't be able to recover in a short time. It wouldn't take long for the entire Laos province to change hands and become a part of Siam. If that was the case, that person wouldn't dare to show up again. What was the difference between that and being dead? Both of them kept it a secret from each other and raised their glasses to celebrate. Then they talked about the operation at night. They would attack the governor's office, the armory, the provincial storehouse, and the granary. In short, before the Siam army arrived, they had to find a way to disrupt the security of Wanxiang City. This was to pave the way for the army to attack. Haiqing left the governor's office once again and went to the military camp. Using military matters as an excuse, he mobilized 2 battalions of 800 men to the granary. The reason why he chose to attack the granary first was because the security here wasn't high. Secondly, without food, it would be easier to cause internal strife. Haiqing was full of confidence. After Luan Xiaoqin and He Guang were gone, he was very confident that there weren't many people in Laos who could control him. Since that was the case, it was time for him to act tyrannically and do as he pleased. There was a saying, plans can't keep up with changes. Haiqing, who wasn't very lucky, met the chief of public security, Longtime. Yang Chendong had told the officers more than once that if they wanted to understand the real situation, they had to move around more. Staying in the office and listening to reports every day was a form of work, but it was still too one-sided. Only by going to the grassroots and understanding more would they be able to make the right decisions and do better work. With Yang Chendong's encouragement, those ministers and vice ministers in Resin City would often take a walk downstairs every once in a while so as to solve the problems that they discovered. This time, Longtime came to Wanxiang City to inspect the security. In the security work, the security at night was often the highlight. Today, Longtime was inspecting the security of Wanxiang City at night. Unfortunately, he met the Laotian army led by Haiqing on the streets. When the two sides met, Longtime stopped and asked, "Which department are you from? It's so late, why are there so many people on the streets? What's the matter?" By right, the Ministry of Public Security had no jurisdiction over the army. However, Longtime was a minister. Even the governor of Laos, Luan Xiaoqin, was a level lower than him. Furthermore, he was from the cold front and had responsibilities. He couldn't help but think of the worst-case scenario when he encountered something. Haiqing was also acting without orders. He was avoiding eye contact and was noticed by Longtime, which was why he asked. Chapter 10:18. Haiqing was afraid that things would get out of hand. When he saw the head of Lao Province's Public Security Bureau accompanying them, his heart was pounding. Now that Longtime had opened his mouth to ask, he immediately thought that he had been exposed. Haiqing, who was not mentally strong, only hesitated for a moment before saying, "We were ordered to take over the granary. For you, how dare you interfere with our military affairs?" Facing Haiqing's question, Longtime was naturally fearless. "I'm Longtime, the head of the Public Security Bureau. I think I have the authority to ask you some questions." "Oh, right, you said that you were going to take over the granary. Do you have the order from the provincial government? Let me take a look." His instincts told him that someone was going to take over the granary at such a late hour. This in itself was very suspicious. Furthermore, Haiqing's words gave off a sense of lack of confidence. Longtime was even more suspicious. After announcing his identity, he was the head of the Public Security Bureau. At this moment, Haiqing's expression kept changing. In the past, there had been a head and vice head of the Chichen City headquarters who had come to inspect the granary. Even the provincial governor, Luan Xiaoqin, had to greet them with a smile. How could he afford to offend such people? Hence, he forced a smile and said to Longtang, "So it's Longtang." "Pardon me. I'm Hai Qing, the Deputy General of Lao Province. This time, I was ordered by General He Guang to check the granary's safety. I don't have the provincial governor's order." The director of the Lao Provincial Public Security Bureau stepped forward and nodded at Long Tainan, confirming Hai Qing's identity as the deputy general. If it was anyone else, since they were all on the same side, and they were both from the military and police, they would not ask too much. However, Long Tainan was a serious person. Hearing that the other party did not have the provincial governor's order, he said, "Since you're following General He Guang's orders, you should have his order, right? Can you take it out for me to take a look?" If he had known earlier, he would have forged a fake order. However, facing Long Tianan's overbearing attitude, Hai Qing knew that he had no way out. If he said that he did not even have the general's order, anyone would be able to tell that there was a problem. Since that was the case, in for a penny, in for a pound. He would just kill him. He had brought 800 soldiers with him, while the other party only had a few dozen men. Having made up his mind, Hai Qing gritted his teeth and pulled out his sword. He then pointed it at Long Tainan and shouted, "Since when do we need to report to the Ministry of Public Security? I see that you are clearly spies. Men, capture them for this general." Hai Qing could no longer keep up the act, so he simply flipped over. When he did that, some of the Laotian soldiers instinctively pulled out their swords and faced Long Tainan and the others. For a moment, the whole street was filled with people pulling out their swords. When Long Tainan saw Hai Qing's actions, he sneered. He was almost certain that there was something wrong with Hai Qing. As for how big the problem was, they could only take him down and interrogate him. Therefore he was fearless. His right hand went to his waist, and a pitch-black 54 appeared in his hand. "What do you want to do? Do you know that I am the head of public security of Chichen City? If you pull out your sword against me, you are disrespecting your superior. Based on this, I can punish you." The head of public security was also stunned by this scene. When he heard Long Tianan's shout, he also shouted, "That's right. This is head of public security who was sent by the higher-ups to check on our work. How can you pull out your swords against him? This is a serious crime. Quickly put away your swords." When the head of public security shouted, some of the Laotian soldiers immediately put away their swords. They did not know that Hai Qing was going to rebel. They all thought that tonight's operation was a normal transfer. As the head of public security of Laos province, he was a powerful figure in Wanxiang City. Almost everyone knew him. After he said that, more and more of the Laotian soldiers started to put away their weapons. Only Hai Qing was still holding his sword. At this moment, his arm was trembling. "General Hai, quickly put away your sword and admit your mistake." The head of public security said unhappily when he saw that everyone else was so obedient. Only Hai Qing was still holding his sword. Seeing that everyone's eyes were on him, Hai Qing was in a dilemma at this moment. If he put away his sword, he would have to face Long Tianan's interrogation. Some things might be exposed if he asked. Hai Qing, who no longer had a way out, simply ignored the others and slashed at Long Tianan's body with his long saber. As long as he could kill this person, he would still be the one in charge here. No one would dare to question his orders. Bang! A crisp gunshot rang out, hitting Hai Qing's right wrist. The sound of the gunshot rang out, and the sword fell. Long Tianan's voice also rang out, "Take him down. This person might be a big problem." A group of public security soldiers rushed forward and held Hai Qing down. This scene was witnessed by the 800 Laotian soldiers, but no one dared to move. This was Hai Qing's mistake. He did bring 800 soldiers with him, but these people were not his soldiers. They were the soldiers of Laos province, Xianxia soldiers. When they saw a higher-ranking officer appear, they would instinctively stand aside and watch. This was because even they did not know what was going on. Long Tainan was indeed the chief of public security. He did things swiftly and decisively. An hour after Hai Qing was taken away, he was tortured to open his mouth. He found out that the Laotian general He Guang was injured and the provincial governor, Luan Shaochen, might be dead. Send someone to the high residence to take down Du Lilong. At the same time, send a telegram to the 6th young master to report what happened here and that the Siam army is about to attack Wanxiang City. After knowing part of the truth, Longtime felt the importance of this matter. He sent out orders one by one. What Longtime did not know was that 2 days later, not only Laos province was in danger, but Cambodia province was also in danger. They were the real targets of the Siam army. Since the destruction of Jiaoji province and the establishment of Vietnam province, Siam, as a large country in the southeast, had been paying attention to the situation here. They had thought of forming an alliance to suppress the development of the 5-star army. However, it was hard to predict what was in a person's heart. Facts had proven that any plan that placed their hopes on others was likely to be unforeseen. When the Phnom Penh dynasty became Cambodia province, Siam knew that they had no way out. If they did not think of a way to counterattack, the 5-star army would attack them the next time. They did not know what kind of province they would become. Siam King Yi Chili was a very capable person. They had just entered the era of a big city. The era of a big city meant that the ruler of the big city had been influenced by the Khmer culture from the start. They were no longer the benevolent and approachable ruler of the Sukhothai dynasty. They were autocratic emperors who used the title of King of Gods. When Siam entered the era of a big city, be it military, politics, or the morale of the people, they were all very strong. In the past, Siam had a permanent army of 500,000 soldiers. 2 years ago, they recruited another 300,000 soldiers. Now that they had completed their training, they only needed to go through a few battles before they could be considered a qualified army. In the past few years, they had been trading with Laos province. They had made a lot of money using the geographical advantage and finally had the advantage of commanding a war. They stockpiled food, forged weapons, and waited for an opportunity. This time, when they heard that the 5-star army was going up against Dufay, they sighed at the fact that Yang Chendong was willing to cause trouble everywhere. King Yi Chili, who could also be called the King of Gods, sensed the appearance of an opportunity. Taking advantage of the fact that the 5-star army was unable to split up, Yi Chili gave the order to attack. In order to achieve the goal of severely damaging the 5-star army, General Godin led the 200,000 Siam troops up north to Wulong City and directly to Wanxiang City in Laos province. Then, General Tong led the troops to the east to Sanlong City in Cambodia province. After that, they went through Wulong City to Phnom Penh City. This position was less than 400 miles away from Suwang City. In order to achieve the goal of speed, before Yi Chili gave the order to attack, he did not even inform his ally, the Awad dynasty, to prevent the news from being leaked. Only a few generals knew about the news. When the army set off, they used the excuse of training as an excuse to hide it from Yang Xie's intelligence network. Only after Longtime captured Hai Ching did Yang Chendong hear about it for the first time. One could not blame the intelligence network for being late. After all, reality had proven the strength of the 5-star army countless times. If they did not find trouble with others, they would be thankful. Who would take the initiative to find trouble with them? However, that was the truth. The sudden attack of the Siam army caught many people off guard. Not long after the news spread, Laos and Cambodia province were in a state of emergency. Telegrams asking for help were sent to Yang Chendong one after another. The action of the Siam army was equivalent to igniting the flames of war in the backyard. This was also out of Yang Chendong's expectations. However, he did not panic. Although the intelligence report said that the Siam army had 800,000 soldiers, which was quite scary, since ancient times, he had always dealt with the situation accordingly. Since there was a problem, he just had to think of a way to solve it. Soon, Yang Chendong personally ordered the 5th Division of the Lu Army, the 1st Cavalry Division, and the 1st Cavalry Division of the New Army in Xianxia City to gather immediately. They had to prepare all the materials and equipment needed for battle and be ready to enter the battlefield at any time. They had to be ready to fight and win the battle. At the same time, Yang Chendong decided to speed up the pace of the attack. He knew that some things could not be delayed any longer. At the same time as the bad news came, there was also good news that reached Yang Chendong's ears. The palace of Resin City had confirmed that the first Madam, Hu Yen, was pregnant and had been pregnant for more than a month. This news made Yang Chendong, who had been frowning recently, smile. Chapter 1019. After receiving the direct order from the 6th Young Master, the Security Bureau and CIB agents lurking on Emil Island began to get busy. With money clearing the way, some officials belonging to the DAF country fell one after another. Soon, the truth was revealed. 2 investigation telegrams were also sent to Yang Chendong. Silver Mountain. Silver Mine. Seeing the contents of the telegram, Yang Chendong immediately laughed. He finally knew why Abu Burkle would rather die than leave the island. It turned out that a silver mountain was found on Emil Island. In Yang Chendong's memory, there were a lot of gold and silver mines on the Japanese Empire. These were recorded in history. But he really didn't know if there were silver mines on Emil Island. Perhaps these silver mines were secretly mined and transported away, so there were no records. But in any case, this was good news. Originally, he wanted to wait and see if other pirate organizations would become enemies with the 5-star army for the silver, but now it seemed that he couldn't wait any longer. The changes in Laos and Cambodia couldn't wait any longer. The silver mines on Island also couldn't wait any longer. Who knew how much was mined and how much was Abu Burkle going to take away? Surround them. Divisions 1, 2, 3, and 1 each to block the southern exit of Emil Island. Without orders, don't allow any enemy ships to leave. After making up his mind, Yang Chendong wasn't going to let Abu Burkle go. He wanted to use this method to keep all the silver on the island. Yes. Gao Xiong saluted and quickly left. Then, only 2 days later, the last gap to leave the island was blocked. On the morning of the 3rd day, Hai Yijuan issued the order for the entire army to attack. For a time, the entire periphery of Emil Island was filled with the rumbling of cannons. The various defensive measures that were previously dug were also destroyed in an instant. Abu Burkle, who was still sleeping, was awakened by the sound of cannons. Then he heard bad news. After half an hour of bombardment, the 5-star army had already begun to land in the north. What happened? Didn't we prepare a large number of defensive attacks? There are also cannons hidden in the dark. How could the 5-star army land on the island so smoothly? Abu Burkle, who was wearing pajamas, grabbed the collar of Aquino, who came to report the news, and scolded him like a madman. Your Majesty, someone must have sold out our military deployment map. As you know, there are a lot of people who know about this matter. Ever since the 5-star army besieged the island, everyone has been in a state of panic. Many of them have colluded with foreigners. Aquino, who was Abu Burkle's most trusted general, said with a bitter expression. At this moment, he really wanted to say that it wasn't because he was incompetent, but because the enemy was too cunning. Releasing his hand, Abu Burkle's eyes were lifeless. He knew that once the 5-star army landed on the island, it would be impossible for him to continue mining. If he made a mistake, it would be impossible for him to leave this place safely. No, I can't die like this. Retreat immediately, retreat immediately. Abu Burkle seemed to have suddenly woken up. He didn't run before because he wanted to mine more silver. He wanted to use a large sum of money to attract more people to become enemies with the 5-star army and buy more time for himself to mine. However, he didn't expect that a sudden incident from the rear would interrupt Yang Chendong's plan to continue fishing. He couldn't wait any longer and finally made his move, catching Abu Burkle off guard. Abu Burkle prepared to retreat. Boxes of prepared silver were lifted from the palace and transported to the nearby docks. But when they were only halfway there, bad luck came. A large number of warships with the 5-star flag appeared from the south. Their path of retreat was blocked. Charge out a path of blood. Anyone who can open a path will be rewarded 10,000 silvers. 10,000 silvers! The enraged Abu Burkle roared loudly. He didn't want to die, and he didn't want his silver to be stolen. Therefore, he gave out the order for a large reward. As the saying goes, when there is a large reward, there will be brave men. After the reward was given out, there were indeed a few desperados who went straight to the warships at the docks. They wanted to gamble and take a gamble. But when they arrived at the docks, the scene in front of them shattered their fantasies. There wasn't a single ship in sight. They were all blown to smithereens. Without a warship, how could they escape on the sea? When the news reached Abu Burkle's ears, he couldn't help but stagger. He knew that he was too greedy this time and missed the chance to escape. But at this point, there was no point in saying anything. He called for Grand General Aquino and ordered him to gather the army and fight the 5-star army on the island. Abu Burkle and the others once again retreated to Marilag City in the royal capital. There, they gathered 30,000 soldiers and 300,000 civilians. They prepared tung oil, rocks, and other things. At the same time, they prepared 30 cannons to defend the 4 cities. It looked like they were going to fight the 5-star army to the death. It was worth mentioning that there were still 5,000 Han civilians in the city. They were the descendants of the Han people that Abu Burkle ordered to find from the various islands. At this moment, these people became his life-saving chips, as well as his final bargaining chip with Yang Chendong. When they attacked Port Luzon, the garrison soldiers there would rather die in battle than fire a single cannon at the local people. This matter had long been reported back. Since the 5-star army was so protective of the citizens, and there were 5,000 Han citizens in the city, they couldn't possibly attack their own people, right? When Abu Burkle retreated to the royal capital, the already precarious outer defense of El Island instantly collapsed. Many generals raised the white flag, and the High E army successfully landed at various locations. The huge M Island was occupied by the soldiers on bicycles in just 3 days. Many of the cities were occupied without a single shot being fired. The Daf country had only been established for a little more than a year. Without any foundation, the civilians weren't loyal and the soldiers weren't loyal. Not to mention that Abu Burkle's rule was extremely exploitative, causing him to be estranged from the local civilians. It was impossible for these people to be loyal to him. Yang Chendong took 1,000 Longwei soldiers on horseback and bypassed some important cities. On the 3rd day, they arrived at the location of the silver mine that the intelligence department reported. It was the western part of El Island, known as the Cotabato area in the future. When they first arrived, they could still see a lot of local civilians shuttling back and forth. While going back and forth, they would carry pieces of silver or with joy on their faces. Impudent, surround them. Beta Persei, who was following them, saw that so many silver ores were about to be taken away. He immediately became furious and roared loudly. 1,000 Longwei soldiers in black immediately surrounded them. They looked like they would start a massacre if they didn't let go of the silver ores. Forget it, they will also be civilians under our rule in the future. Yang Chendong shook his head. For real enemies, he wouldn't be soft-hearted, but for unarmed civilians, he couldn't be so cruel. Longwei opened up a path, and the local civilians scattered like birds and beasts. Longwei took control of this place and gave a strict order. If there were any civilians spying on this place, they could only be killed without mercy. Yang Chendong dismounted and walked into the silver mine. When he saw the serious damage caused by the careless mining, he couldn't help but feel distressed. Even Beta Persei, who had never taken silver seriously, couldn't help but say, "Young master, this is too wasteful." Yes, it's too wasteful. The circulation of silver is already depleted. The more it is used, the less it will be used. In the long run, no matter how many silver ores there are, it won't be of any use. Yang Chendong nodded in agreement. At this moment, he had the idea of printing money himself. This idea wasn't a new one, but he had considered it before. It was just that time hadn't matured yet. Silver was indeed a good thing. In any era and era, it was the best thing to circulate, second only to gold bars. But why did it stop later? Wasn't it because the consumption was too great? Someone once did a survey. After a few years, 1 tael of silver would eventually be left with half a tael after constant circulation and friction. This was equivalent to shrinking wealth. In the long run, no matter how much silver there was, it wouldn't be enough for such consumption. Replacing silver with paper money was an inevitable development in the future. Today's Yang Chendong was no longer a scholar with no military power. The power in his hands was already very great, and Yang Xia's products had always been in short supply. As long as they were the first to promote it, paper money was very likely to become a circulating thing and replace gold and silver. Beta Persei, send someone to contact the nearest naval soldiers and let them seal this place. When the silver mining team appears, we can start mining. Don't waste a single cent, Yang Chendong said with heartache as he reached out and touched the mountain that had already been mined. A day later, Yang Chendong left the mine with 1,000 Longwei. Another day later, they arrived at the city of Marilag. Here, the commander of the 1st Sea Army, Gao Xiong, had already led the main force of the 1st Sea Division to make preparations to besiege and attack the city. What's the situation inside the city? In the camp 5 miles away from the city, Yang Chendong asked Gao Xiong. Reporting to the 6th young master, there are about 30,000 soldiers of the Great F Kingdom in the city. There are also 300,000 local civilians. Among them, there are also 5,000 Han civilians. When Gao Xiong said the last sentence, he was a bit hesitant. There are also Han civilians? When Yang Chendong heard this, his eyebrows slightly raised. Obviously, this result was somewhat unexpected. Yes, they are all Han people and their descendants from the entire archipelago. Perhaps Abu Bakr knows about our policies towards the common people, especially the Han people, so he intentionally prepared this move to make us hesitate. Gao Xiong was a bit angry when he said this. Obviously, he was very angry at Abu Bakr's shamelessness. Chapter 10:20. Yang Chendong was also very angry at this kind of behavior. However, this was war and not a game. In order to win and protect oneself, anything could happen. He could not blame Abu Bakr. Even if he could, it would be meaningless. More importantly, Laos, especially Cambodia, was in a state of emergency. He did not have much time to waste on the enemy. Pass down the order. Take away all the ships from Emil Island. C3 Division, send out 2 regiments to guard the silver mine. The rest of the divisions will patrol the sea. We must keep Abu Bakr here. After we deal with Siam, we will deal with them. Since it was easy to hurt people with a heart attack, Yang Chendong changed the attack into a trap. He wanted to see how long the Daf country could last after losing contact with the outside world. Yang Chendong decisively changed his strategy from attacking the city to surrounding the island. He sent out C1 Division and C2 Division as he was not in a hurry to deal with Daf. After that, the 2nd Division headed straight for the Straits of Malacca and entered the southern border between Malaysia and Siam, Chun Prang Island. The 1st Division was ordered to head straight for the Gulf of Siam. It was led by the Vice Admiral of the Navy and commander of the 1st Division, Gao Xiong, to pose a threat to Siam. After sending out C1 Division and C2 Division, Yang Chendong took the War God No. 1 and went straight to White Horse Port. He wanted to bring 1,000 Black Flag Longwei as the first batch of reinforcements. He wanted to teach Siam a lesson. Laos, Wanxiang City. Long Tainan caught Hai Qing, but regrettably, Hai Qing escaped upon hearing the news. When he didn't hear the news of Wanxiang City's food being seized within the stipulated time, he had a bad premonition and escaped first. Fortunately, after the news spread, He Guang appeared. He was injured by Hai Qing that day. Fortunately, the knife did not hit any vital parts. Although he could not kill the enemy on the battlefield in a short period of time, it was not a problem to cooperate with Luan Shaochen. After all, there were 30,000 Laos soldiers in Laos. Although their combat strength was average and only had the combat strength of a C-rank unit, they were still a force to be reckoned with. Yes, Hai Qing wanted to cooperate with Luan Shaochen's work. It was rumored that Luan Shaochen had been killed by Do Lilong. These words came from Hai Qing's mouth. At that time, many people were shocked when they heard it. How could this young governor, this person with a bright future, die so young? It turned out that Hai Qing was lying. Or maybe he was deceived by Do Lilong and Luan Shaochen was not dead. Not only that, when he reappeared, he was accompanied by the commander of the 2nd and 6th Divisions, Luo Pe, as well as the commanders of the 2nd and 6th Divisions. Coincidentally, the day she disappeared, Luan Shaochen went to Yunnan province to see Commander Luo Pejuan. Although there was no evidence to prove that Siam was doing something wrong, and there was no news from any intelligence agency. The Siamese merchants had not received any goods from Laos for 2 months. That was the truth. Not only that, but some of the caravans that Laos had sent to Siam had also gone missing. When Wang Xiaochen found out about this small change, he did not alert anyone else. Instead, he decided to go to the headquarters of the 2nd Division and ask for help from Luope. If something happened, at least he would have soldiers at his disposal. Considering that it was all his own conjecture without any evidence, Wang Xiaochen did not alert Yang Chendong and his other colleagues from Laos. Instead, he went there on his own. In order to prevent others from discovering his whereabouts, he intentionally left the sedan behind and assigned 10 guards to disguise themselves as Lung Feng to escort the empty sedan to and from work. However, he did not expect to be ambushed by Dou Lilong. His luck was really good. After Hai Qing was captured, Wang Xiaochen confirmed that Siam was going to mobilize their troops. Wang Xiaochen appeared with the 2nd Division and even arrived at Wanxiang City before Siam's General Gedon. When the 200,000 Siamese soldiers arrived at the city walls, they were greeted by the sight of the cold vanguard soldiers dressed in neat green uniforms standing on the walls of Wanxiang City. In the 5-star army, there was an obvious way to determine the strength of a unit. That was to see if they were wearing formal uniforms. For example, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd divisions of the Cold Vanguard Army were all dressed in military green uniforms when they were training and fighting in battles. Another example was the High 1st and 2nd divisions of the Lung Feng soldiers. They were both in white and sky blue uniforms. Other than that, there were not many units that had the same uniform. For example, the 1st Cavalry Division had earned the right to wear this uniform due to their strong combat ability. Another example was the new division of the Grassland Army. As they had been out fighting for many years, they had achieved great military merits and many of them were also in formal uniforms. Other than that, there was a portion of the new division, the newly formed new 2nd Army, and the Mabe Division that did not have the right to wear formal uniforms. Not to mention the Laos Army, which was a local 3rd Division, did not have the right to wear formal uniforms. Now that there were so many soldiers in formal uniforms on the city walls, it was needless to say that they were not local troops like the Laos Army. Instead, they were the main forces of the 5-star Army. Great General Gordon, who saw this scene from afar, was disappointed. Then, he turned to look at Dulalong, who had escaped from the city, and said, "Didn't you say that Wanxiang City is in chaos? What's going on?" "General, do you think it's the Laos Army in disguise?" Dou Lilong could not come up with an explanation, so he made up an excuse. "We'll know if it's a disguise once we try. Send 2,000 soldiers to test it out." General Gordon was not sure if these were the main forces of the 5-star Army or local troops. He could only test it out. Under his command, the 2,000 Siamese soldiers formed a formation and attacked. The results of the experiment went without saying. When the 2,000 Siamese soldiers were 200 meters away from the city walls, the commander of the 2nd Division, Xiao Feng, gave the order. Immediately, a regiment of 2,000 soldiers fired at the same time, killing most of the Siamese soldiers and forcing them to flee. This result was like a blow to the Siamese army. Gordon's expression turned ugly. He immediately ordered, "Keep an eye on the enemy at all times. At the same time, order 30,000 cavalrymen to be on standby. Once the enemy exits the city to fight, charge over." At this moment, Gordon had no choice but to face reality and lower his expectations. He originally wanted to take over Wanxiang City, but it seemed like it would be a great achievement if he could hold back the main forces of the 5-star Army. Gordon would not attack casually. The commander of the 2nd Division, Luope, Long Tainan, and Wang Xiaochen, the governor of Laos, sat together and discussed how to deal with the situation. This time, Lu Er did not mobilize the entire army. While Lao province was not peaceful, the Awa dynasty in the west was also restless. In addition, the South Ming army and the rebellious Zhu Huilu in the north were still fighting. Who knew when Zhu Huilu would be defeated and move towards Langsun? Leaving Lung Chi Division, there was already the minimum they could do. It was precisely because of the lack of manpower that they had to face the 200,000 strong Siamese soldiers with only 2 divisions. including 30,000 cavalrymen, that they were obviously short on manpower. They could defend the city, but it was very risky to attack outside the city. Commander Luo, what do you mean? In the governor's manner, Luan Xiaochen poured a cup of tea for Luo Pe as the host and asked. This battle is not going to be easy. The enemy has 30,000 cavalry and can attack at any time. If we attack outside the city, we might face a counterattack at any time. Once we are entangled with the enemy, we will not be able to fully utilize our firearms. Not only will we not be able to deal heavy damage to the enemy, we will also be implicated. In the end, there will be problems with the defense of Wanxiang City. Luo Pe was born in the military and was used to speaking straightforwardly. He did not have any intention of hiding anything and spoke directly. Yes, we have less than 20,000 men. Even if we include the 10,000 Lao soldiers in the city, we have less than 30,000 men. Against 200,000 Siamese soldiers, it is not wise to attack. Longtime also expressed his opinion. There were 30,000 Lao soldiers in Lao province, but not all of them were stationed in the capital. There were only 10,000 of them here, and if it wasn't for Lu Erjuan's timely arrival, they wouldn't have been able to defend the city, let alone launch an attack. Longtime expressed his opinion and Luan Xiaochen nodded to indicate that he understood. In a sense, Luan Xiaochen and Longtime were both relatives. One was Yang Chendong's brother-in-law and the other was his younger brother-in-law. This identity made it much more convenient for them to do certain things. However, on the other hand, their every action affected the hearts of others. Of course, it's good to have a good result. You can gain merits and be rewarded faster than others. However, if there were any problems, even Yang Chendong would be accused of nepotism. That would be very disadvantageous. This caused the two of them to have too many restrictions on their actions. Since both of you have the same opinion, let's focus on defending the city first, and then report this opinion to the sixth young master. Luan Xiaochen finally concluded in a way that could be considered as deciding on the defense of the city. There were two divisions of the second division in charge of the defense of Wanxiang City, so it was foolproof. When the telegram was sent to Yang Chendong, he said to the telegram operator Wang Shan, "Approved. Tell them to keep an eye on the movements of the 200,000 Siamese soldiers. If they discover that they are retreating or splitting up their forces, they can find an opportunity to attack. Before that, we must prioritize the defense of the city." The telegram operator Wang Shan took the order and left, leaving Yang Chendong behind. He looked towards the northwest and said, "Beta Persei, order Long Wei to speed up. The other reinforcements might not be able to arrive in time. Other places can be attacked, but Phnom Penh City cannot be attacked." Chapter 1021. Cambodia province had only been established for 2 years, and the first 1.5 years had been spent on pacification. It had only been half a year since it started to develop. It had just started to improve, and now it had to go through the baptism of war. If they lost the provincial capital, it would undoubtedly have an extremely bad impact on the whole province. If they wanted to stabilize the situation, it would take a lot of effort. For the long-term development of the province, they could lose other places, but not Phnom Penh City. Yang Chendong had to go to Phnom Penh City as soon as possible and personally lead the battle. In Phnom Penh City, Cambodia Province Governor Sun Xiaoguang was ordering people to prepare stones and kerosene. There was news from the front lines that the Siamese army had reached Suwang City. To ensure the safety of the city, he had sent 5,000 Cambodian soldiers, so there were only 5,000 soldiers left in Phnom Penh City. This was a very dangerous number. If Suwang City was lost, then Phnom Penh City would be in danger. He was not confident. On the tower, Sun Xiaoguang looked at Dun and Dagon and asked, "Both of you have been here for a long time. Do you think Suwang City can be defended?" This question made the two of them look a little ugly. In the end, Dun said, "Governor, I'm afraid it won't be easy to defend. You know, although Suwang City is a big city, it only has 1,000 soldiers. Even if we sent 5,000, the news said that the Siamese army had 100,000 soldiers. With 6,000 against 100,000, they came prepared. I don't think we can win this battle. Yes, our military strength is limited. Dagon also took the opportunity to put forward his own opinion. Logically speaking, if the army did not have enough combat power, it was his responsibility. However, the Yang faction had a rule that as a province, they could only have 30,000 soldiers. Such a large Cambodia province was equivalent to the former Phnom Penh dynasty. It only had 30,000 troops. Usually, it could suppress bandits and maintain the stability of the region. However, when it came to a real army, it would be difficult for it to fight against them. How could Sun Xiaoguang not know what Dun and Dagon were talking about? However, if there were too many troops in a province, not only would it increase their burden, it would also be a hidden danger. Once someone took the opportunity to stir up trouble, the greater the number of troops, the greater the destructive power. Therefore, he agreed with Yang Chendong's decision to not allow more troops to be deployed in the province. This also meant that in the event of an external invasion, the only way was to ask for reinforcements. I know what you two are thinking. We just have to do what we need to do. I believe that it won't be long before reinforcements arrive. At that time, we'll be able to take back everything we've lost. We also have to believe that Vice Governor Ding Dingwei in Suwing City, he will definitely be able to hold on until our reinforcements arrive. Sun Xiaoguang could only use this method of encouragement. However, even he himself did not know when the reinforcements would arrive. After waiting anxiously for a day, bad news came. Suwing City was in danger. The Siamese army was much faster than they had expected. They had sent 5,000 reinforcements to surround Suwing City first. Then, they lured the 5,000 Cambodian soldiers into the encirclement and killed them. After destroying the 5,000 Cambodian soldiers, Suwing City had no external help and was in imminent danger. Taking advantage of this, the 5,000 Siamese army vanguard went straight to Phnom Penh City. The news was sent back by the scouts at the front. After hearing the news, Sun Xiaoguang was shocked. He immediately went to the city tower and ordered that no one was allowed to open the city gate except for his orders. Otherwise, they would be charged with the crime of collaborating with the enemy. At the same time, he called the president of the Chamber of Commerce, Dun, and asked him to pay close attention to the status of the other members of the Chamber of Commerce. Businessmen had always been mercenary and it was difficult for them to be loyal. It was normal for Sun Xiaoguang to have such concerns. After receiving the order, President Dun immediately said that he would do his best to protect the Chamber of Commerce and ensure that there would not be any problems. The former Prime Minister of the Phnom Penh dynasty had been living a very comfortable life recently. After becoming a businessman, there were no more restrictions. He did not have to worry about other people's opinions when he spent money. In addition, he had a lot of real power as the president and earned a lot of money for him. He had already taken in 3 concubines. He had money and beautiful women to accompany him and did not have to worry about being impeached. He would never allow anyone to destroy such a good life. Even if it was for himself, Dun would do his best. Sun Xiaoguang trusted him. After seeing President Dun off, he went up the city tower with General Dun and waited for the first wave of enemies to appear. In the early morning of the next day, the Siamese army appeared from the top of the tower of Phnom Penh. They waved all kinds of military flags and happily came to Golden Rim City. It seemed that whoever was a step slower would have fewer benefits. Tell the soldiers to prepare their bows and arrows. General Dun of Cambodia entered the role of commander. At the same time, Governor Sun Xiaoguang also began to command the people in the city to deliver defensive items to the city tower. President Dun of the Chamber of Commerce also came with a group of Chamber of Commerce members. In order to protect Phnom Penh City and their own industries, they all had money and things. It was a busy scene. Young master, the enemy has appeared. There are 5,000 of them. In a barren mountain 8 miles outside Phnom Penh City, Beta Persei told Yang Chendong, who was resting against a big stone. They rushed all the way and finally arrived at noon yesterday. However, Yang Chendong was not in a hurry to enter the city. He wanted to see how Phnom Penh City defended against the enemy and whether they could defend in this difficult environment. After several days of hurrying on the road, the 1,000 shadow cavalry finally got a good rest. Finally, the enemy that they had been waiting for had arrived. Is that so? Order the scouts to keep an eye on every movement in the distance. At the same time, let everyone have a good rest. The war is coming. Yang Chendong opened his eyes and said this. After that, he closed his eyes again and rested. As the founder of the Yang faction, as well as one of the core figures, there were too many things that he needed to do. He needed to seize every moment of rest that he could get. On the city tower of Phnom Penh City, Governor Sun Xiaoguang and others did not know that the sixth young master was 8 miles away from them. At this moment, all their attention was on the enemy below the city. When the 5,000 Siamese vanguard arrived at the city, they first shouted to persuade the enemy to surrender. They said that the 100,000 Siamese army was behind them and could arrive at any time. If they surrendered now, they could save their lives. Otherwise, when the army arrived, it would be difficult to save their lives even if they wanted to surrender. For this kind of persuasion, General Dun of Cambodia responded with action. A volley of arrows rained down, forcing them to retreat repeatedly after shouting, cursing incessantly. Since it was useless to persuade them to surrender, the next step was to attack the city. The 5,000 vanguard divided into 4 groups and attacked the 4 city gates. In a one-on-one battle with such a ratio of attack and defense, there was almost no suspense about the result. After a day of siege, the Siamese army did not gain anything other than hundreds of dead bodies and hundreds more wounded. The Siamese army was not in a hurry to attack the city. Instead, they gathered in one place and set up camp. They were waiting for the main force of the Siamese army to arrive. When that time came, they would attack the city with all their might and kill. The sky was dark. There were torches on the city tower of Phnom Penh City from time to time to prevent the city from being attacked. The only thing they could do was to send people to keep an eye on the 4,000 Siamese soldiers below the city. With the current military strength in the city, it was not enough to defend the city, let alone attack the camp. If they did it well, they might gain something. But if they did not do it well, it was tantamount to opening the city gate for the enemy to enter. Neither Governor Sun Xiaoguang nor General Dun dared to take such a risk. They seemed to know that the Cambodian army would not leave the city easily. The Siamese army below the city was not in a hurry. They only arranged for 500 soldiers to be on guard, and those who were supposed to sleep went to sleep. The army in the city did not dare to attack, so the garrison outside the city naturally did not have to worry about it. However, they neglected the existence of one person, Yang Chendong, and 1,000 Black Knights, who had arrived a day earlier. It was not an exaggeration to say that the Black Knights were 1 in 1,000. According to Yang Chendong's 8 characters, the ferocity of the wolf, the loyalty of the dog. The Black Cavalry, which numbered only 1,000, was in existence that even the world's #1 cavalry division, which was famous for its cavalry, found difficult to deal with. In an exercise, 1,000 Black Knights had defeated 3,000 warriors of the 1st Cavalry Division. Even Division Commander Tian, who had a headache when faced with the Black Knights, who were heavily protected, including their warhorses. The Black Knights, which deserved to be called the #1 Cavalry, were going to attack tonight. Their target was the 5,000 Siamese enemies below Phnom Penh City. The Black Knights, who had rested for a day and a night, were at their strongest state, and their killing intent was at its peak. The 6th young master had already said that they could kill tonight. They did not need to take prisoners. They only needed to watch. They wanted to use this battle to teach the incoming Siamese army a lesson. They wanted to let them know the serious consequences of going against the 5-star army. In the dark night, after Yang Chendong gave the order, he took the lead and moved forward. Behind him were 1,000 Black Knights. They were originally fully armored, and with the cover of the Black Manor, even if they were 10 meters away, it would still be very difficult to discover their tracks. Under the leadership of Yang Chendong, the 1,000 Black Knights did not choose to attack immediately. Their equipment was too heavy, so they were not suitable for long-distance attacks. They came carefully until they were only 3 miles away from the enemy camp. When they could see the torches of the enemy camp, Yang Chendong's right hand reached for his waist, and a steel sword immediately appeared in his hand. Brothers, follow the young master and charge. Chapter 1022. Charge! The 1,000 Black Knights, who could not wait any longer, shouted loudly. Then, the sound of iron hooves thundered on the ground, signaling the start of the charge. The ground trembled. The 500 soldiers of the Siamese army, who were sleeping, were awakened by the noise. They looked for the source of the noise and saw a shocking scene. In the dark night, countless black shadows came, followed by flashes of silver light. The men borrowed the speed of the horses and the power of the swords. The silver swords, which were better than ordinary iron weapons, were swung. Countless heads flew, and countless weapons were cut in half. The appearance of the Black Knights took the Siamese army by surprise. The 500 soldiers were chopped down like vegetables. In just one exchange, 300 of the 500 soldiers had fallen. Under such a powerful force, the remaining Siamese soldiers had lost the courage to fight. They covered their heads and ran away, screaming for help. Some of the more timid ones even knelt down and surrendered. The appearance of the Black Knights was like the Grim Reaper in the dark night. The powerful combat strength they displayed was daunting. There was no way to resist at all. The 500 well-prepared Siamese soldiers were so vulnerable, let alone the other Siamese soldiers, who had been tired from the siege for a day. Many of them had their tents torn open while they were still asleep, and they lost their heads in their sleep. Against an enemy that was 4 times their number, the shadow cavalry showed their strength and ferocity. Every time they swung their swords, an enemy's head would be cut off. Every time the horses galloped, red blood would flow, and the screams of countless enemies would be heard. The scene below the city quickly alerted the Cambodian soldiers on the city tower. The news was reported to Governor Sun Xiaoguang and General Dagan. They rushed to the city tower and saw that the Siamese army was almost completely wiped out. It's the Black Knights. It's Long Wei. It's the 6th young master. Governor Sun Xiaoguang, who was knowledgeable, used the only night vision telescope in the city to see what was happening below the city. Then he could not help but scream in excitement. Only Yang Chendong's appearance had such an influence to make a provincial governor lose his composure. Quick, open the city gate. Let's go out and welcome the 6th young master. Sun Xiaoguang was so excited that General Dagan couldn't believe what he was hearing. Was this still the calm and steady governor's son? Under Sun Xiaoguang's urging, the city gate was opened. He led General Dagan and 3,000 Cambodian soldiers out of the city. At this time, the battle outside the city had ended. In less than 2 hours, nearly 5,000 Siamese soldiers had been wiped out. It seemed shocking, but it was not a big deal that a Black Knight only needed to kill 4 to 5 people. Outside the city gate, someone was leaving the city. Naturally, a Black Knight reported the matter to Yang Chendong. Under the protection of Beta Persei and the others, Yang Chendong rode his horse and saw Sun Xiaoguang with the help of the torchlight. At this moment, Sun Xiaoguang also saw Yang Chendong. From afar, he knelt on the ground and shouted, "6th young master, long live the 6th young master." As Sun Xiaoguang knelt, the people around him also knelt and shouted, "Long live the 6th young master." People in this era were deeply influenced by the feudal society. It was common for people to kneel on the ground. Get up. Yang Chendong was already numb to it. It could even be said that he was used to it. After Governor Sun Xiaoguang received permission, he stood up and took a few steps forward to Yang Chendong. He said excitedly, "6th young master, have the Siamese soldiers been wiped out?" "They've all been wiped out. No one survived. Since you're here, I'll leave the matter of Lijiang Taoist temple to your Cambodian army." Yang Chendong had a warm smile on his face. As soon as he finished speaking, General Damien immediately stood at attention and saluted. Then, a large number of Cambodian soldiers went to the chaotic Siamese camp ahead. Governor Sun Xiaoguang was left behind. Before he could ask, Yang Chendong took the lead and said, "This time, I'm the only one who came in advance with 1,000 Longwei soldiers. The other reinforcements are coming here one after another. As long as we can hold on for a while, the danger will be gone." By the way, what's the situation here now? Hearing that only the sixth young master came with 1,000 Longwei soldiers, Sun Xiaoguang was shocked. There were 5,000 Siamese soldiers here, but they were all killed by 1,000 people. It was said that the sixth young master's Longwei soldiers were invincible on the ground. It seemed that it was not an exaggeration. Sun Xiaoguang organized his thoughts and answered Yang Chendong's question. The sixth young master, the situation is not very good. Previously, in order to solve the siege of Suing City, I sent 5,000 Cambodian soldiers. Unfortunately, they were wiped out before they could even enter the city. Now, only the deputy governor, Ding Wei, led 1,000 Cambodian soldiers and 200,000 people in the city to resist. Their survival is uncertain. Oh? Hasn't Suing City been captured yet? Hearing this answer, Yang Chendong asked with a little surprise. I haven't received any news yet. There is no radio in the city. I really don't know what's going on there. Sun Xiaoguang replied with a little embarrassment. Yang Chendong and Sun Xiaoguang were worried about the situation in Suing City. Here, torches were lit on the city walls and people were busy. The deputy governor, Ding Wei, was using the night to strengthen the city's defenses. Previously, Suing City was breached by the 5-star army. The city walls were also attacked by cannons and were riddled with holes. This was all thanks to the arrival of the 5-star army. After occupying the entire Cambodia, Suing City was an important transportation hub. The city walls were strengthened, and because of this, the city was able to withstand the attacks of 100,000 Siamese soldiers for several days. Of course, this had a lot to do with the deputy governor, Ding Wei, guarding the city. In fact, on the first day of the Siamese army's attack, the general guarding the city was already dead. Since then, Ding Wei had the final say. Because of this, some of his ideas were realized, such as using the power of the people to defend the city. In ancient times, there were situations where the people and soldiers defended the city together. However, this was mostly because the army had won the hearts of the people. After Suing City was occupied by the 5-star army, land was distributed, trade routes were opened, and a series of heavy taxes and slave systems were abolished. Because of this, many people were able to live a better life. Once the people's lives improved, they would naturally feel grateful. They would also be filled with more yearning and hope for the future. At this time, the Siamese army came. They wanted to let the people live their lives again. Therefore, the first to disagree were the local people. In order to protect the fruits of their victory, many people wanted to contribute. However, because there was no name and no organization, it was difficult to form a strong force. Ding Wei only appeared as an organizer. At the same time, as the deputy governor of Cambodia, he gave these people a name. In this way, the power of the people was maximized. The originally weak city became a nail that was fiercely stabbed into the wall. The Siamese army could do nothing about it. To fully utilize the role of the people, Ding Wei first ordered people to open up the armory in the city. He took out the weapons and armor stored inside and distributed them to the adult men of Jiwei City. Then, he opened up the storehouse in the city and took out the small amount of gold and silver stored inside. He also handed over the gold and silver to the Yang family bank that had just been built in the city. This action had caused the manager of the bank to loudly reprimand him. Whether it was the warehouse in the city or the Yang family bank's warehouse, no one was allowed to touch it without permission. Otherwise, it would be a felony. Even if Suing City was captured, these things would become the spoils of war for the Siamese army. However, as long as the city was not captured, these things would not be touched. However, this rule was forcefully broken by Ding Wei. I, the deputy governor, will not take a single cent of this gold and silver. It will be used as a reward for the soldiers and civilians who defended the city. If someone questions me about this matter, I will bear all responsibility. Ding Wei answered the bank manager and the official in charge of the treasury in this way. The gold and silver were taken out and piled up under the city tower for the 200,000 people to see. As more and more people gathered around, Ding Wei found a high place and stood. He said loudly, These silver tails are for the warriors who defended the city. Next, whether it is soldiers or ordinary people, as long as you do something beneficial to the defense of Suwang City, you will be rewarded. With these silver tails, I will not go back on my word. This was the promise that Ding Ding Wei made to all the people in the city. Now that they had the money, the next thing was the name. Ding Ding Wei sent people to put up notices all over the city. It was written in detail that any citizen, no matter what clan they were born in or where they came from, as long as they could pick up a sword or a spear or carry a stone, they could sign up to defend the city. If they died in battle, their loved ones would be given a pension. Once they performed a meritorious deed, they would report it to their superiors and be rewarded accordingly. Suwang City was a big city. There were 200,000 people in the city. There were Han people, grassland people, Koreans, and people from Luzon and other countries in the southeast. After the notices were posted, the Han men were the first to sign up. As people who benefited from this, now that the city was in trouble, they were the first to step up. With the Han men taking the lead, more people started to sign up. Among them, there were some women who were in good health. They could also move the stones under the city. Ding Ding Wei waved his hand and issued weapons to them. He allowed them to enter the city and fight. Chapter 1023. As a result, Suwang City, which originally only had 1,000 Cambodian soldiers, was filled with soldiers. In a short period of time, more than 10,000 people had signed up to defend the city. Ding Ding Wei divided them into groups and tried to make sure that every group had some soldiers who knew how to fight. That way, with a leader, they would have a higher chance of winning the battle. The courage of the people was very good. Whether it was to protect their homes, their families, and the fruits of their labor, or because of the rewards, they all climbed up the city walls without exception. However, when it came to fighting with the enemy, as they had not been trained, their weaknesses were quickly exposed. For example, some people were so nervous that they didn't wait for the Siamese army to climb up the siege ladders. They threw the stones down the ladders, but it didn't work. Some people were so nervous that they threw their swords down the ladders. When they realized that the enemy had climbed up the ladders, they threw their swords down. They had no choice but to fight the enemy unarmed. Some people saw people around them fall down. They saw blood flowing all over the ground. Some people's heads were chopped in half. Some people's intestines were flowing out of their stomachs. They couldn't help but vomit. They didn't have the strength to do anything. Too many accidents happened, and because of that, the number of deaths increased. Cries of agony filled the city walls. Ding Ding Wei did not cry. It was not that he did not want to cry, but that he could not. As the only commander, as the backbone of everyone, he could not show the slightest bit of soft-heartedness. The only thing he could do was to distribute the gold and silver to the families of those who had rendered meritorious service and the fallen warriors, keeping his promise. As a result, the limited amount of money soon shone. In the end, Ding Ding Wei had to write IOUs. According to him, as long as they could defend Suwang City, they could come to him with IOUs. He would pay them one by one. Regardless of whether they received the money or IOUs, at least they had hope for the future. On the other hand, once Suwang City was breached, everything they had now would be for naught. Even if it was for their own future, they had no choice but to defend the city. With such a firm belief, countless people picked up their swords and spears and rushed up the city walls. They resisted the onslaught of the 100,000 Siamese army. General Tong Si, who was leading the army, was originally full of confidence in taking down Suwang City. At one point, he had thought that he would be able to take down a city with only 1,000 defenders in less than half a day. However, he had already wasted nearly 10 days here, and he was still unable to take over the city. This made him very angry. What made him even angrier was that news came from the front, saying that the 5,000 vanguard troops sent out had all been killed at the foot of Golden Rim City. The 5,000 heads were made into a statue, which stood at the foot of the city as a warning to the world. Rebellion, rebellion. Hearing that the attack on Golden Rim City was not going well, General Pomelos was furious and ordered to continue attacking Suwang City. He might be able to bypass this place, but if the attack on Golden Rim City did not go smoothly, he would not even have a base for his rear. If that was the case, how were they going to treat the injured if there were too many? Once the rations were insufficient, it would be very troublesome to transport them. In the long run, Su Wang City had to be taken down. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to carry out their plans. At the foot of Su Wang City, the sound of the bugle horn became more urgent. More and more ladders were sent out, and more soldiers were sent out to attack. However, all of this was in the hands of the soldiers of Su Wang City. They were still unable to succeed. Day after day of attack, in addition to losing more and more lives, Su Wang City was still standing on this piece of land, and the 5-star flag was still flying high above the city. The siege of Su Wang City was still ongoing. Under the leadership of Gao Xiong, the 1st Sea Division rushed all the way to the Gulf of Siam. Here, they encountered the 50,000 Siamese navy who were already prepared. As if they knew that the 5-star army would appear here, Gao Xiong and his men had just entered the sea when the scouting ships in front of them returned. They reported that more than 800 ships with the Siamese flag were coming from all directions, and they looked like they were about to surround them. They are seeking death. Pass down the order, we will attack after they enter. Gao Xiong's expression did not change. Previously, they were able to easily wipe out the Dafei Navy with Western cannons. Now that they were facing the Siamese Navy, whose cannons were even more backward, what was there to fear? After the order was given, the entire 1st Sea Division became excited. Previously, when the 2nd Sea Division and the 4th Sea Division joined forces to deal a heavy blow to Ma Keqing's pirate army, they were envious when they heard the news. Now, they finally had a chance to fight a big battle. Compared to the time when the 2 divisions defeated 60,000 pirates, this time, they would have to face 50,000 Siamese navy, and their contribution would only be greater. At this moment, the ships maintained a safe distance and began to move slowly. The scouting ships in front of them constantly sent back information through the flag. 2 hours later, the 2 sides finally met in the Gulf of Siam. Looking from afar, the 50,000 Siamese navy was huge, and they were densely packed together as if they were endless. However, the soldiers of the 1st Sea Division only became more excited. At least, there was no trace of nervousness or fear on their faces. They knew that the enemy's cannons couldn't hit them, and they could aim at their targets as much as they wanted. What was there to be afraid of? The Siamese Navy General Meng also saw the 5-star army from afar. When he saw that there were more than 100 ships, which was less than 1/6 of their strength, his face was full of confidence. Haha, order the entire army to attack and surround them. Don't let a single one of them go. Before the news of Ma Keqing's defeat had spread, the Siamese Navy had already sent themselves to their deaths. This was the tragedy of the lack of information. This was destined to be a battle without suspense. At the same time, it was also destined to be an unequal naval battle. The naval battle of Jiawu was an unequal naval battle. The difference in the tonnage of the warships of the 2 sides was too great, which led to the crushing defeat of the Qing dynasty. The current naval battle of the Gulf of Siam was the same. The power of the cannons, especially the attack range, was completely different. Before the battle, the outcome was already decided. The Siamese Navy, equipped with a small number of cannons, still relied on bows and spears for close combat. When they were 5 miles away from the 5-star Army's 1st Sea Division, and were still moving at full speed to engage in close combat, the sound of cannons suddenly rang out. The Siamese Navy was completely unprepared. The warships at the front were hit one after another. Some sank slowly, some broke into 2, and some burst into flames. Soon, they were completely thrown into chaos. In contrast, the 1st Sea Division advanced with speed. While the cannons roared, the 4 regiments and 1 division's battalion advanced in 5 different directions. One by one, the Siamese ships entered their line of sight and became the target of their cannons. The Siamese soldiers were completely outmatched in terms of military strength and weaponry. The Siamese soldiers did not even have the ability to defend themselves. In the end, one by one, they were hit by the cannons and sank into the sea without a trace. After only half an hour, the Siamese Navy, whose formation was completely messed up, began to retreat. After witnessing the power of the five-star army's cannons, they finally saw the gap between them. They knew that if they continued to fight, they would only be sending themselves to their deaths. The Siamese Navy's General Meng Wa led the retreat, wanting to leave the battlefield. Hence, the cannons of the 1st Sea Division started to expand. From the previous 5 to 6 miles, the current 8 miles, 10 miles, and finally 12 miles, 13 miles. In terms of speed, the five-star army's ships were not only larger, but also faster. From start to finish, they were chasing the enemy. Often, the faster the Siamese ships ran, the faster they ran. The cannons continued to bombard, and time after time, the results of the battle continued to expand. This battle lasted from noon to night, from night to dawn, and from dawn to noon. This continued for 2 days before it finally came to an end. 50,000 Siamese soldiers and 800 ships were sunk within 48 hours. More than 200 ships had no choice but to raise their white flags and surrender. In the end, only General Meng Wa managed to bring 30 ships back to the port. Then, the port was bombarded by cannon fire. Other than General Meng Wa, who was quick to escape with more than 2,000 men, the other 3,000 Siamese soldiers who were guarding the port were also killed by the cannon fire. In this battle, the Siamese Navy was completely annihilated, causing the seemingly powerful Siamese to become a country without ships. The 1st Sea Division continued to pursue. Other than leaving behind a few ships to take over the captured ships, the main force continued to occupy Gi and Sarm Islands, and finally reached the capital of Siam, Bangkok. If not for the fact that the capital was too far away from the coastline, the 1st Sea Division would have already bombarded Bangkok. The Siamese Navy was completely annihilated, and the five-star army actually chased them all the way here. While they occupied the pier, they were less than 300 miles away from Bangkok. The moment the news spread out, the King of Italy was scared out of his wits. Before he hurriedly sent out another Grade 2 general, Naok, to lead 100,000 troops to defend the coast with Meng Wa. This was to prevent the five-star army from charging onto land and threatening their south. The annihilation of the Siamese Navy caused a crisis in their south. At the same time, it also meant that the initial Siamese attack and the five-star army defense had turned into a stalemate. Without enough troops, the 1st Sea Division did not venture onto land. They only faced off against the 100,000 Siamese soldiers, occasionally firing a cannon to intimidate them. In Wanxiang City, Governor Luan Shaochen was constantly mobilizing troops from the province to prepare for a counterattack. In Suing City, the cost of defending the city every day was more than 1,000 men. However, Deputy Governor Ding Wei did not back down. He held on and waited for an opportunity to be rescued. Chapter 1024. In comparison, Phnom Penh City, which was their target, was very calm as Suing City had not been taken down yet. Especially after the 5,000 Siamese vanguard troops were wiped out by Yang Chendong and the Black Cavalry, Siam Grade 2 General Tong Chi did not send anyone to attack. Since the enemy did not attack, Yang Chendong was ready to counterattack. The reason he made this decision was because a portion of the reinforcements had arrived. The 5th Division of the Lu Army had entered Cambodia from Chichen City and arrived at Phnom Penh City at noon. Yang Chendong personally went out to welcome the arrival of the 5th Division. Along with him were the Cambodian Governor Sun Xiaoguang, the Cambodian General Don, and the Chamber of Commerce President Dun. Dun appeared here to thank the army. Yang Chendong appeared with a group of merchants from Golden Rim City. They brought a lot of meat and hot meals. General Dagan came here to prepare for a joint attack. After discussing with Governor Sun Xiaoguang, Yang Chendong made a decision to counterattack the Siamese army and save Suing City. Yang Chendong did not know what had happened in the city to be able to hold on until now. However, his intuition told him that without troops and food, they would not be able to hold on for long. If he did not send reinforcements, once the city was broken, the situation would change. With the arrival of the 5th Division, Don was prepared to bring 3,000 Cambodian soldiers to work with him. Along with the 1,000 Black Cavalry, They had more than 10,000 men. If they suddenly entered the battlefield, it would have a good effect. Yang Chendong left 2,000 Cambodian soldiers with the provincial governor, Sun Xiaoguang, and told them that 2 cavalry divisions from the grassland were on their way here, and that no matter what happened, they were not allowed to open the city gate until they saw reinforcements. Yang Chendong then led more than 10,000 troops north. Suwing City. Just as Yang Chendong expected, it was really difficult to defend. After all, it was a group of untrained civilians defending the city. They relied solely on their bravery. However, after defending for so long, the number of casualties was already very high, especially after the death of the 1,000 Cambodian soldiers who were originally guarding the city. There were no trained veterans on the city tower, and the situation could collapse at any time. Ding Ding Wei had already climbed up the city walls many times to encourage everyone. The square in the city was filled with corpses. After a rough calculation, there were 20,000 dead and 30,000 injured. All in all, the Siamese army only had 10,000 casualties. This was the difference between untrained civilians and soldiers on the battlefield. Ding Ding Wei didn't know how many nights he hadn't slept. When he was too sleepy, he would just find a place to sleep for a while. He felt as if his spirit was about to collapse. Anyone who found him and wanted to talk to him had to shout loudly. Otherwise, his ears wouldn't be able to hear any words. Even in such an atmosphere, Ding Ding Wei was still holding on. He could not fall because he was the god of the Suwang people. If anything happened to him, the people who had gathered together would quickly disperse. When faced with the Siamese army attacking the city, they would not be able to resist at all. After another difficult day of defending, the Siamese finally stopped beating the war drums and the soldiers retreated like the tide. Ding Ding Wei could not help but wobble and fall to the side with his eyes closed. A soldier who had followed him for many years quickly caught him. His eyes were full of tears. In the past 20 days, his master hadn't slept properly. He really didn't dare to imagine how his master had managed to get through it. Taking advantage of the fact that no one was paying attention, he used his own body as a bed and let Ding Ding Wei lean against him and fall asleep. Although the bodyguard was also very tired, he persisted. If possible, he wanted to persevere until dawn, just to let his master have a good sleep and replenish his energy. However, reality did not allow him to do so. Suddenly, there was movement in the night below the city walls. First, there was a burst of gunshots and shouts in the Siamese camp. It was chaos. Soon, a cavalry came to the south gate. Someone was shouting something. The sudden change in the battle was not something a small soldier could handle. Ding Ding Wei, who was sleeping, was also awakened by the shouts. He opened his eyes and asked, "What's wrong? Where am I? What's going on? Is the enemy going to attack again?" "Master," the Siamese camp was suddenly in chaos. Then, there was someone shouting at the south gate. No one knows what happened. The soldier wanted Ding Ding Wei to sleep for a while, but he knew that since something had happened, it could only be solved by his master. "Let's go and take a look." Although Ding Ding Wei was still very sleepy, he had slept for more than 2 hours. He recovered a little. Following his duty, he walked to the south gate. At this moment, there were over 100 adult male citizens standing on the southern city gate. They held torches in their hands and looked at the cavalry below the city. All of them looked at each other, but did not know what to do. Among them, one of the more impatient ones asked, "Have you sent for the deputy governor?" "Yes. He should be here soon." They could not help but be anxious. The cavalry said that they were the 6th young master and asked them to open the gate immediately. They would help defend the city. Yang Chendong had many names. From the Dong Shui when he first arrived at the capital, to the war god when he defeated Walla's army, to the Duke of Loyalty, to the war god who came later, to the Heavenly Khan, to Bugnam of Gojoseon, and so on. However, there was a name that could be used anywhere, and that was the 6th young master. The 6th young master was a name that even the ordinary people under Yang Xie's rule knew. But most people had only heard of his name and had never seen him in person. Now that someone said that the 6th young master was outside the city, it inevitably attracted more attention. Some people were excited while others did not believe it. At this time, Suing City was very dangerous. As the saying goes, a gentleman would not stand under a dangerous wall. They would probably avoid it as soon as possible. How could such a noble person risk his life? This was the reason why they did not want to believe it at all. But regardless of whether they believed it or not, wasn't there Deputy Governor Ding Tingwei in the city? A high-ranking official like him should have seen the sixth young master before. Then, wouldn't it be obvious if he was telling the truth? Young master, we can't open the gate with explosives. Yang Er, who was among the cavalrymen at the foot of the city wall, saw that the city wall was still closed after a long time. He was worried that the Siamese soldiers who had been attacked would come after them, so he said anxiously, "No." Yang Chendong denied. Suing City has been defended until now because of the high walls. It was not easy to defend for so long. How can we blow it open? Let's wait. Although he didn't know what was going on in the city, Yang Chendong had a rough idea of what was going on with the help of the torch upstairs. It looked like they were all men dressed in commoners' clothes. Based on this, he could see how difficult it was to defend the city. He had even sacrificed his life for this place. How could he possibly blow up the city gates just to enter the city a little earlier? Yang Chendong did not allow it. Beta Persei could only anxiously say to Dao Xiao, the captain of the second guard team, "Send someone to inform Commander Xiao Yining. Let's hold them off for a while." In the blink of an eye, another 15 minutes passed. There was a commotion on the gate tower. Then, a middle-aged man wearing a distinctive Chinese tunic suit appeared beside the torch. Yang Chendong looked up and recognized that this man was the deputy governor of Cambodia, Ding Tingwei. "Bring me the torch." In order to let the other party see him clearly, Yang Chendong said to Beta Persei. Immediately, a torch was handed over. Yang Chendong personally held it in his hand. He first looked at himself, then shouted to the gate tower, "Deputy Governor Ding, I am Yang Chendong. Open the gate." With the light of the torch, Ding Tingwei saw Yang Chendong and suddenly shouted, "It really is the sixth young master. Quick, open the gate." When the Phnom Penh dynasty surrendered, Yang Chendong went to Phnom Penh City and had a drink with the officials there. It was at that time that Ding Tingwei saw Yang Chendong for the first time. He could not forget it. Although it was dark now, with the light of the torch, he still recognized him at a glance. After Ding Tingwei confirmed his identity, the city was suddenly in chaos. Half of the people who could live in Suing City were immigrants from outside, and the other half were the original natives. But no matter who it was, they did not know how many times they had heard the name of the sixth young master. Now that they finally had the opportunity to see the real person, and even get close to him, who would not be excited? Soon, the south gate opened from the inside. The Heike followed closely to protect Yang Chendong as they walked into Suing City. Behind them, 3,000 Cambodian soldiers and the fifth master Lu also followed. Soon after, the south gate closed again, and everything fell into silence again. At this moment, the city was very lively. Under the leadership of Ding Tingwei, a group of people guarding the city walked to the front of the horse team. When they were still some distance away, Ding Tingwei bowed his head and kept shouting, "This official greets the sixth young master. Long live the sixth young master. Long live the sixth young master." This was a group of subjects who were used to the feudal dynasty. Yang Chendong had long been used to this. He turned over and dismounted, striding forward with his head held high. This action made Beta Persei and the Heike who were following him very nervous. "Okay, don't follow so closely. These people have been guarding the city until now and have not surrendered. This shows their loyalty. How could they harm me?" Yang Chendong felt that the black cavalry in front and behind him were not conducive to his actions at all. He could not help but frown. "Young master, it's better to be safe than sorry." Beta Persei did not obey the order, but had his own set of rules. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.